And I want to welcome all of you for this final day of the Asia Clean Energy Forum, and particularly for this deep dive workshop on energy, water, food, climate nexus. For this workshop, we have two sessions. This session one is mainly focusing on enhancing our understanding of the energy, water, food, climate nexus a bit better. But more importantly, how do we streamline the national and sectoral policies to address various synergies and trade-offs in this nexus? And after coffee break, the session two will focus on a few case studies, which are still undergoing, and basically focusing on renewable energy solutions to address nexus, both in the field as well as under the controlled environment, such as the innovations in hydroponics, etc. I think for this audience, it's not new, but we all know that the energy security, food security, water security, and now climate security, they're all interlinked, and they are critical for sustainable development. We know that, for example, agriculture and food chain, if you look at the entire value chain, it accounts for almost 33% of the energy demand and also contribute nearly 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. And we also know that agriculture and food itself maybe takes account for more than 70% of the water demand. It may vary with each country, but on an average, around 70%. And again, more than 70% of the energy produced, at least now, is water intensive. Even when we say renewable energy, that needs water. So, but the problem is that most of the time, both policymakers and practitioners in the field, they are only looking in a silo approach, and pursuing individual sector goals can really interfere with achieving other goals. And at the same time, we are also facing a lot of insecurity, whether it is energy insecurity. We still have about 800 million people without access to electricity. Almost 3 billion people lack safe and clean cooking facilities. In terms of food insecurity, still 850 million people are food insecure. 1 in every 6 people is going to bed hungry every night. And in terms of water insecurity, also 700 million people lack access to safe water. And recent report says more than 3 billion people out of 7.5 billion now are vulnerable to climate stresses. So the context of insecurity is actually increasing, not only because of climate change, but also other things like we also faced in terms of conflicts and COVID-19. At the same time, the projections suggest that our energy demand is going to increase by 50% by 2035. Water demand also is going to increase by 85% by 2040. And food demand also is increasing by 60% by 2050. If we really want to achieve these goals in a climate-friendly manner, it is not easy. And this is where actually this session would like to focus. And we need your help also to understand how various countries are dealing with this dilemma or nexus. But we have been hearing this nexus concept for maybe more than 15, 20 years. But the challenge is that still policymakers, or for the matter, practitioners, are really somewhat clueless in terms of effective way to implement on the ground. And from ADB point of view, actually, ADB Strategy 2030 also identifies this nexus as a critical priority to pursue. And ADB is aiming to become a climate bank of the Asia Pacific with a lot of climate ambitions, whether it is in terms of helping our developing countries in terms of net zero commitments, meeting the net zero commitments, or improving the resilience, whether it is water, food, everything. So, so that is an important priority for ADB. again, I mean, we have done some initial work only, but we have a lot to go. And we have, for example, produced a short report on the Nexus indicators by our SDCC department. And we are also having some pilot studies going on in Central Asia, South Asia, and also Southeast Asia. And recently, we also have an initiative to train the policymakers in collaboration with IHE Delft. Our water sector group is actually conducting a training for 2 months, training of the policymakers in DMCs on these Nexus issues, mainly to focus on a roadmap towards greener, more circular, and lower carbon agricultural production. So if we look at the national policies, whether it is a national economic policy or national development policy documents of our member countries, both developed and developing countries, you rarely see any reference to this, how to address the Nexus issue. This is a fundamental challenge at a national level. And when you go to sector level also, it is very rare national energy policy, for example, talking about implications for food security or water security, or for that matter, resilience of the entire ecosystem in a changing climate. Same applies to national water policy or even national agricultural policies, and recently even the national climate policies. There are some countries actually having a climate change law, for example. Again, the Nexus issues have not received so far much attention. They are only looking at either climate goal or agricultural targets, etc. These contradictions are not something easy to resolve, but I hope today's session, we will make some progress. And for this session, we have 5 distinguished panel members. I will briefly introduce their backgrounds and request them to come onto the dais. First, Mr. Vicente Perez, is called Vince in short name. He is an avid environmental advocate and also renewable energy investor. He is currently chairman of the Alter Energy, a wind, solar, runoff river hydropower developer. And maybe some of you already know, a few years ago, he also served as the Philippines energy minister from 2001 to 2005. And he is the champion in terms of crafting an ambitious renewable energy policy framework. And he also served as a deputy minister for trade and industry, and also as vice chairman of the Philippines National Renewable Energy Board. And more interestingly, in terms of background, he also worked with World Wildlife Fund, and he's also currently on the boards of both WWF China as well as WWF US. So some nature connection is also very well understood. So we have an excellent speaker or a panelist from that angle. Then I have my colleagues, actually, Miss Alison Woodruff. She is a principal water security specialist. She has more than 15 years of experience in environmental and natural resource management, mainly focusing on urban water supply and sanitation, tourism, and natural resource management in Southeast Asia and also Pacific. Prior to joining ADB about 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, she worked with the Secretariat of the Pacific Community and also UNDP. And the next colleague is my colleague Sumit, whom I know for quite some time. He is an environmental specialist in South Asia department. He has also 20 years of experience in many countries in GMS as well as US and Nepal. And he also has a broad experience in terms of community-based climate change mitigation, adaptation, landscape conservation, livelihoods, and so on. And before he worked with many international organizations, at the EU, USAID, US EPA, World Bank, and others. And next, we also have Miss Victoria Lokson. She is now working as the renewable energy lead for Asia at Blue Water Shipping. She is actually focusing on project delivery. And she's also, I mean, a lot of experience, not only in the energy issues, but other water-related issues as well. And finally, my colleague, I mean, he's the co-organizer, Sohail. He is an energy sector veteran with over 35 years in 15 countries. I mean, substantial experience. And basically, he covered many projects focusing on solar power, electric vehicles, hydropower, transmission and distribution. Before coming to ADB, he worked with the energy sector of Australia, with the State Electricity Commission of Victoria. He has a good mix of academic background, both in engineering and finance. So I think, and more importantly, he has become an entrepreneur now, or energypreneur recently. And he is looking at energy transition through electric vehicles, solar power, and batteries, etc. But each of the speakers that we have, I mean, has a long list of accomplishments, which is difficult to read out now. So with that, I would like to request all the 5 panel members to come on to the dais, please. Please now. First, I will request Vince Perez. Vince, I mean, you were as I just mentioned before, you helped the Philippines in terms of by drafting the renewable energy policy framework nearly 20 years ago or 18 years ago. What do you think? I mean, what is the progress so far in terms of this renewable energy policy framework in terms of adoption in the Philippines? And also how this renewable energy technology you think can play a great role in terms of improving the physical and economic access to food and water without impacting climate so much, I mean, adversely. And I also want to know a little more about your new initiative on alter energy, how it is addressing these Nexus issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ascha. And thank you again to ADB for inviting us here. I attended ACEF for many years now. Glad to be meeting again face-to-face for the first time post-COVID. Really, within just an hour, I already picked up so many ideas. And that's the value of attending this ACEF. As Ascha mentioned, I was energy minister. It was a tough one. I was asked to privatize the power sector. But how do we did the roadmap on renewable energy? One, sometime in 2004, the Senate briefings, there was going to be a major VAT that was going to be implemented. And there was a big struggle between the finance minister and myself. Should electricity be VATable? Of course, I didn't want it to be VATable because it's going to raise electricity prices. But they said they needed to have it inclusive. So I agreed. Okay, we'll make electricity sales VATable by 12%, but can we exempt renewable power? And they agreed. That was a quasi-carbon tax in a way on fossil fuel. So that is still a big advantage for renewable power sales today. We have a 12% advantage over fossil fuel in terms of power generation sales. In 2006, a biofuels law was passed, meant to promote fuels. We have actually a 5% cocoa diesel blend in every diesel fuel here. I wish you could smell the coconut scent, but the traffic is maybe too much. But it is a 5% blend of cocoa methyl ester in this country. Second, on our gasoline, our petrol, there is a 10% blend of bioethanol. Sadly, it hasn't really helped much the sugar industry here because a lot of that is being imported from Brazil. But whether that's an energy policy or an agri policy, I think we could debate that. 2008, finally, a major landmark renewable energy law. I had just spent a year sabbatical after my energy post in some Ivy League university somewhere in the East Coast. And I took that year to learn all the possible policy instruments that can promote renewable energy. So in the bilateral discussions in the House and the Senate of the RE bill, we put every possible policy instrument there feed-in tariff, renewable portfolio standards, net metering, green energy option, and so forth and so on. A very ambitious project in 2008. Well, many years later, you're seeing some of the fruits of that. Next week, there'll be a bidding of what we call the green energy auction. 118 projects are qualified to bid for either onshore wind, floating solar, onshore solar, rooftop solar, biomass, and I understand next year offshore wind. But let me talk about the topic today, which is the nexus of energy, food, and water. And what I'll do, I'll give you 3 live cases from our company, Alternergy, a renewable power developer that we just took public a few months ago. 3 live cases of how we deal with food and water with our renewable projects. I'll make this anonymous because not all the projects we pursued, but I'll let you guess which ones we did and which ones we did not. Case number 1. Project developer comes to us, half baked, half finished. They have some permits. It's in a rice field area. They got a contract to put solar power. They have an offtake agreement. Wonderful. You have a PPA already. You have an offtake. But the land was not quite certified by the Department of Agrarian Reform. They were waiting to get it certified that it was eligible to be converted to industrial. How are they doing it? The developer that wanted to sell to us was paying rice farmers not to plant. They were paying rice farmers not to plant rice so that it becomes eligible to be converted to solar. Case number 1. Did we pursue that or not? Case number 2. A very old family, 4th generation, had a huge tract of land somewhere in the Philippines that's now been converted to one of the largest fish pond. They grow 12 varieties of fish, fresh water. It's been over 4 generations passed on to one great-granddaughter who rather would spend more time in Makati than out in the middle of the fish farm. She would like to convert it and lease it out to a solar project, to us. And the idea was that, could it be a floating solar? We did a site, and it's by a river. During rainy months like today, it's flooded, but during dry months, it's not flooded. So do we install a floating solar? Do we dredge the fish ponds and get rid of the fish farm operation? Because we're not an aquaculture company, we're a renewable power company. Or do we find a way to blend a solar system over an operating fish farming business? We'll let you know what we decided to do with that. Third and last case study. We've been invited to build a solar battery project on a Pacific island nation. They're suffering from very expensive imported diesel. Why? Not only because their demand is so small, so quantity-wise, they don't get economics of scale, but because there's thousands of kilometers away from the nearest refinery of Taiwan, of Korea, or even Singapore. The cost of transporting this fuel is so high and so expensive that once it lands on that island nation, the cost of electricity to the retail is so expensive. So therefore, a battery solar project was asked. But it's also a major tourist destination. A lot of tourists go there. And the site that was awarded to us was a savanna. Wonderful. We don't have to cut any trees, but it's on a slope, and downhill this slope is a creek that feeds into a popular tourist destination, a crystal clear waterfall, very popular. The environmental bureau said, yes, go ahead, build a solar battery project there, but we do not want your project to produce from the downfall, the runoff. Remember, we're on a slope, such that the water that ends up flowing into this creek downstream of your slope should be crystal clear, should not be turbid, should not be brown, because we don't want to destroy the beauty of that waterfall that's a tourist destination. So what do we do? Those are the 3 case studies. I leave it, given we have some time constraints here, but during the Q&A, I'll be happy to answer what we did with case 1, 2, and 3, and maybe you have some suggestions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a good food for thought on the early morning of final day of this Asia Clean Energy Forum. Maybe now next I will request my colleague Alison. Basically, as I briefly mentioned, ADB is taking this as issue of the Nexus seriously. Given your work at ADB, what do you think is the right approach, or what is ADB's approach as per our operational plan number 3 in terms of addressing climate, energy, water, food, climate nexus? And also, I want you to ask, because of your experience in multiple countries, which water policies at national or sub-regional level are crucial to address this nexus issue, and also the tools that you suggest in implementing the nexus approach?
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Srini. And I think you touched on a lot of those issues in your opening, but under Strategy 2030, our ADB's long-term corporate strategy, which aims to promote sustainable, resilient, and inclusive development in Asia and the Pacific, operational priority 3 focuses on tackling climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and enhancing environmental sustainability. So it really recognizes the importance of the food energy nexus, and looks at the fact that you can't have energy, food security without water security. So it looks at ensuring overall water security, while at the same time deepening the understanding of the linkages and trade-offs between food and energy needs. And it looks at the country level, the sector level, and the project level. Similarly, ADB released its new water sector strategy at the end of last year. And that also, one of the key guiding principles under that strategy is promoting environmental sustainability and circular economy. So under that, our push is really to support our developing member countries to promote the positive links between water, food, and energy. And also to, first of all, raise awareness of the issues among our developing member countries. And then secondly, to provide guidance on how to address those interdependencies, looking for win-win benefits across the sectors, but also taking a more cross-sectoral perspective in looking at the trade-offs and the ability to deal with these. And I think as we move towards our new operating model, one of the main shifts is the solution shift and the push to work in a much more integrated and multi-sectoral manner between the different sector teams. And I think we're seeing that play out increasingly, having multiple collaborations between project teams to jointly support the water, food, energy nexus across projects and within divisions. So maybe just to give a recent example from Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, 73% of irrigation is, agriculture land is irrigated by pumped groundwater. Half of that is by small diesel pumps, and the remaining half is through electricity, grid-connected electricity. So diesel consumes about 1 million tons of diesel per year, which is huge. And so the government has been looking to develop a solar irrigation pumping roadmap to reduce diesel dependence and promote the use of renewable energy. But recognizing the Nexus approach, ADB teams from the South Asia energy teams and water teams have been working together to embed Nexus thinking within that roadmap. So part of that work is to look at where groundwater recharge is critical and map out areas where solar pumping offers the greatest potential and areas that should be avoided due to potential stress on water resources. So that's just one example of a collaboration. In terms of policies, I think, Srini, as you said, one of the key issues is the lack of policy coordination and coherence across, not just across sectors, but across scales. So from local, sub-basin, national to international levels, that coordination is really important, as well as between public and private sectors. So having those cross-sectoral, multi-level governance systems and the platforms are really important for promoting Nexus approaches. As you mentioned, currently we're very siloed in many countries. We have vertically integrated sector ministries with sector-based policies and plans that don't take into account a more integrated, holistic approach. And this can really have negative implications for sectors. Recently, ADB worked with the OECD to look at water governance across Asia, the Pacific, linked to our Asia Water Development Outlook 2020. And it found that 2/3 of our DMs, developing member countries, don't have water allocation mechanisms in place to allocate water between users and prioritize water allocations in times of water stress and scarcity. One of the most glaring examples, I think, is around groundwater resources and agriculture. For example, there's been a lot of policies to promote food security through increased agricultural production. So governments have been providing subsidies for electricity and for pumps. And while this has achieved the objective in terms of boosting food production, it's also resulted in over-abstraction of groundwater. So in South Asia, 90% of groundwater is used for agricultural irrigation. And then similarly, again, the example of Bangladesh with the solar irrigation, if you don't consider the water resources management aspect of that, it can have negative implications for water resources. So having these institutional arrangements for Nexus thinking is critical, and some countries are moving towards that. There's a few good examples out there. For example, Japan, I think, has achieved this higher level sort of Nexus thinking and promoting national water resources management plans. And these plans provide a comprehensive approach across sectors, and they're approved by all water related ministries, ministers, Minister of Finance, Ministers of Planning, to try and look at the cross-sectoral implications of the Nexus. And then similarly below that, they have river committees to manage key river systems at the basin level. And then recently in Malaysia, actually, at the end of last year, the Ministry for Water and Energy actually merged, which again will facilitate that Nexus approach. River basin organizations, again, play a critical, at the sub-basin level, play a critical role in coordinating and planning of water resource allocations. But some of the key issues in effective institutional regimes include the lack of data, insufficient authority and mandate, and limited capacity of institutions. So those are some of the challenges. Another aspect that I wanted to touch on was the transboundary water cooperation element. This provides an added complexity once you start talking about Nexus approach involving multiple countries. And one of, I think, good example is ADB supporting countries in Central Asia under the CARIC water pillar to promote greater coordination and planning in energy and water sectors. For example, upstream countries rely on hydropower for meeting their energy needs, whereas downstream countries rely on water resources for agricultural production. And so the seasonality of hydropower production has implications for the availability of water for irrigation. So it's been estimated unless competing demands for water are addressed and win-win solutions are identified, that by 2030, there could be a supply gap of 37%. So this coordination through the CARIC water pillar has been really important to try to look at that nexus. And they're looking at supporting investments in water, building greater knowledge, information base, creating a platform for dialogue and facilitation of capacity building. And then briefly just on water, just I guess more generally on the governance is the pricing of water. So where water is priced too low, we see a lot of misallocation, not putting water to its most productive use. I talked about the over-abstraction of water resources. And for example, if water is underpriced, there's little push to sort of move towards more innovation, more efficient agriculture, for example, looking at precision irrigation. And then also in the urban water sector as well, our average non-revenue water in our region is about 50%, because in many cases, water is very much underpriced. So there's little incentive for utilities to address those high losses, which has implications for energy use, because water production and distribution is quite energy intensive. So there's a few mechanisms out there like water markets and water trading schemes. It's still very much underdeveloped. Murray-Darling Basin in Australia is probably one of the best global examples of water markets in action and pricing. But there's also good examples from Latin America around payment for ecosystem services, an example where hydropower producers are paying upstream users to protect the watershed to ensure that there's sufficient water resources for energy production. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Vince has provided a perspective from an energy sector, how to address the nexus and gave case studies. Now, Alison also provided from a water sector perspective how this nexus should be addressed. Now, I'd like to request Sumit actually to look from the food sector, I mean, agriculture sector perspective. Basically, in your view, what are the South Asia's experiences in addressing this nexus? And what type of agricultural policies at national level are crucial, or how can they be modified further in terms of effectively addressing nexus? And if you have any success factors that are critical that you have identified through your work in South Asia, that would be wonderful. And finally, in terms of supporting controlled environment agriculture, for example, like hydroponics in a country like Maldives, which has its own challenges, what are your plans to support such country?
Thank you. Thank you, Srini, and greetings to everyone. Let me start by repeating some of the Nexus issues probably has already been highlighted, and which also holds true for South Asia. First, the impact of climate change are manifesting in food security, but that is primarily happening through water insecurity, either water stress or water-induced disasters. Another important thing to look into is water supply, particularly groundwater and lift irrigation, is driven by fossil fuels. And agriculture sector thus requires to transcend low carbon and resilient pathway. So in this context, let me highlight the current Nexus status in South Asia. Nationally determined contribution and NAP, National Adaptation Plan, processes have provided the required impetus towards low carbon and climate resilient development, with an emphasis on technology transfer and mobilization of investment. There is a net zero emission commitment on smaller economies like Bhutan and Maldives. They're seeking for that by 2030. So there is a huge commitment. National economic and sectoral policies and strategies increasingly support good agriculture practices. Government have put a high emphasis on food, water, and energy security. However, as I think Srini had also mentioned earlier, strategic planning and investment decision continues under sectoral silos and on ad hoc project by project basis. So this has resulted in increasing competition over land and water allocation. And land and water are prerequisite for food, water, and energy security. So Nexus framework provides a grand development vision, however, requires a systematic approach in terms of planning, investment decision, and institutional arrangements to translate into action. I think that there is a gap. In my view, the success factor or critical driver underpinning Nexus objective is integrated natural resources management. Old integrated natural resources management probably sometimes is missed in our discourses. Integrated natural resources management should emphasize a spatial approach to planning and investment. This includes increasing the use of special units such as land use, watershed, small island as planning units beyond sectoral planning. I think that needs to come together. There are international and regional good practices, which indicates that adoption of integrated resource management in development planning has yielded positive results in terms of water and energy security and reduced environmental and carbon footprint. Integrated resource management is increasingly utilized in power development plan. Again, even there are good examples in the regions, like country like Thailand, Vietnam, they have been increasingly adopting integrated resource planning to enhance efficiency and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions of the power development plan. So in this context, let me outline some of the key elements of integrated resource management. First, understanding demand is critical to avoid inflated or underestimated demand for food, water, and energy. It usually happens, especially like we've seen in power development planning, where demands are inflated. And thus, it allows some of the less suitable projects to get prioritized. And by looking at proper demand, I think some of this could be avoided. Scenario-based planning is critical. Low, high demand scenarios, variation due to external shocks needs to be built into scenarios, and also climate change could be built into scenarios. Demand side management is important for better augmentation of resource use, efficiency, including energy, water, and other agriculture input efficiency. Good understanding of natural resources and technological options and alternatives, and then optimization of the best available solutions. I think that's important. For example, like surface water versus groundwater, fossil fuel versus renewable energy. So these options must be evaluated when we are designing program and projects, and move beyond least cost options and start internalizing environmental and social cost. I think that has now slowly started happening in development planning processes, but that needs to be done more. And move beyond infrastructure demand, stand-alone projects, to more integrated approach by applying systems thinking. I think that is required when we are designing programs and projects. So now, please allow me to share a couple of projects the ADB is developing, applying an integrated approach. First, the application of integrated resource management in small island countries for climate resilient food systems. So this is the project that we are designing in Maldives. It's titled Enhancing Climate Resilience and Food Security Project. Here we used island as a management unit rather than using a sector as an entry point to identify key issues. So some of the issues that came from the diagnostics includes high food import dependency. 70% of Maldives consumption is coming from other parts of Asia. There is a declining feed stock because of climate change and need for import substitution. There is limited availability of arable land. There is hardly any land available. So only 27 square kilometers of land is available for agriculture. And water is scarce. There is a very thin groundwater lens. And then high climatic risk on top of that, sea level rise, saline water intrusion, change in precipitation. So almost 80% of Maldives land area is less than 1 meter above sea level. So like once we enter from a geographic perspective, it brings up like a lot of these nexus issues, and that enables us to design and integrated solutions for the project development. So some of the interventions that the project has include low input agriculture practices, control environmental agriculture in urban peri-urban settings, example hydroponics, which Srini was alluding to, and a promotion of native nutrient-dense crop. But in order to do that, we also have to look into water because water is scarce. So we are looking at integrated water resource management that includes rainwater harvesting, groundwater recharge, and in Maldives, we can't do without desalination. But then we have to look into what are the energy options that is available for desalination of water. So decentralized energy or like solar run desalination plants. And then in addition to that, so probably we can call it Nexus Plus, we also have to look into other issues like land use planning, weather forecasting, flood protections, and also like other nature-based solutions. So this is one example. Another example is application of landscape approach in mountain ecosystems. So from island to mountains for climate resilience and water security. So this is a project in Nepal. It's called Climate Resilient Landscapes and Livelihoods Project. Here we are using sub-watershed as a management unit, and basic to identify interrelated issues. So issues include water insecurity, prolonged drought, increased frequency of floods and landslides. Again, degraded ecosystems in catchment, including forest fires, food insecurity due to upward shift of agroecological zones, lack of water storage infrastructure, and energy use is, again, mostly dependent on biomass-based energy source. It's interesting, about 95% of households in Nepal have now access to grid electricity. However, more than 70% of energy consumption of Nepal is still supplied by traditional biomass. So again, it brings out all these nexus issues. So in terms of integrated solution for food, on food side, we are looking at regenerative farming, agroforestry. That also contributes to sustainable land and water management. Water, we are looking at spring water protection and harvesting, catchment treatment, management, and surface runoff and soil erosion control. And energy, there is option for gravity-fed water supply, solar lift irrigation, forest residue to biomass-based energy. And again, there are other interrelated issues such as land use planning, weather forecasting, nature-based livelihoods, and so forth. So finally, please allow me to outline some enabling conditions to uptake Nexus or integrated approach. Again, I think it's important. Planning could be integrated, but probably implementation still will have to be sectoral and will remain to be sectoral. First, there is a need to strengthen periodic planning systems, including guidelines on integrating natural resources management. Then there is a need to strengthen institution and human resources capacity in context of decentralization and devolution. A lot of countries in South Asia is going through this process of decentralization and devolution. Example, Island Council in Maldives or municipalities in Nepal, and similar setups in other countries. Then there's a need for sector-specific standards, energy efficiency, water use, pollution control, safe food. I think some of these things Alison also was mentioning earlier. Last but not the least, I think national programs with portfolio of projects applying integrated approach needs to be developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit. Now I'd like to go to Victoria. As a solar project developer in the Philippines and Vietnam, we'd like to request your perspectives on the growth of solar power in Southeast Asia, and more importantly, on which policy drivers have really worked in terms of addressing this nexus issue between solar power, food security, and water security, and the potential for the agrivoltaics. I think that is a new area that you are also looking at, and hybrid systems like floating solar and fish farming. Along those lines, kindly, maybe, yeah, you have a presentation.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. I think from everything I've heard from my co-panelists, I guess I'd like to say that we want to have this conversation on the Nexus, not just specifically for Asia, specifically for Southeast Asia, but also it starts a conversation for the rest of the world. My generation is ready to talk about this because we're gonna catch this. Okay, so not everyone probably is familiar with Blue Water. Blue Water Shipping is a Danish company that does shipping. Of course, it's in our name. But specific to that, we have an energy ports and projects division that works on shipping specifically for energy projects, because they work with people like me who have a very good familiarity on how energy projects should go, scheduling, the level of liabilities and risks on any minor delays and such. So as of 2020, the installed capacity in megawatts of solar PV in ASEAN countries, that's here. It's very clear that Vietnam has a huge cut. The rest of us has a lot to catch up on. The Philippines, you've got Thailand. This big chunk of yellow, that's Thailand, not to be confused with Indonesia over there. Malaysia with their LSS projects, and then of course the Philippines ramping up. We're looking at an estimate of 1 gigawatt per year up until 2030. Now, by 2030, and as estimates go, the ASEAN will deploy 241 gigawatts by 2030. That's huge compared to this. That's huge. And just approaching 2050, major players such as Indonesia, I think everyone has been speaking with PLN at some level, Vietnam, and then Thailand. They're all doing at least 10 gigawatts a year until 2050. Um, Sir Vince, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. You're probably more familiar with the policy side of this, but for the Philippines, we're gunning for a gigawatt a year until 2030 and no solid announcements up after that yet, but I think we're pretty aggressive on what will happen during this period until 2030. And similar to what happened with the FIT race, the decade before, the government reevaluates on is it going well? Are the investors actually getting the return? Do we have enough manpower? Discussion on manpower is very important because we have limited slots on the auction. And once those are awarded, everyone's gonna clamor for logistics, supply slots on production, manpower. I think even with all the construction workers in the Philippines, it might not be enough. So it's also a discussion. Then specifically for the Philippines, the projection is plus 10 gigawatts until 2030. And as I mentioned earlier, no further policy push on a more solid basis compared to what Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand has beyond 2030. Now, in terms of energy policies, I think I think it's been discussed elaborately the past few months because of at least in the Philippines, we're doing the auction. Everyone's keen on joining. Here I have a short list on energy policies that cover renewable energies and the Nexus as a sub goal. So the Philippines, we have the Philippine Energy Plan and of course Renewable Energy Act amongst other laws that support it. In Myanmar, we have the NEP. Malaysia has the National RE Policy and Action Plan. Thailand has the AEDP or the Alternative Energy Development Plan. For Indonesia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's the National Energy Policy or the KEN. For Vietnam, we have PDP. So they are coming from PDP 7, PDP 7R, and then PDP 8, which was just published last month. And then for Singapore, you have the Singapore Energy Story. Lao is the PDP and their REDS, their REDs. For Brunei, you have the Brunei Energy White Paper. Cambodia, you have the energy policy and of course also a PDP. And then for Timor-Leste, you've got strategic development plan. So policy links between power, solar power, food, and water security. I think in the next 5-10 years, you're gonna see solar/hydrogen joining this nexus. And I think this is of a big discussion in terms of water. Because like as mentioned earlier, when water is too cheap, the allocation goes in a different way, not as planned. Now imagine we have all these hydrogen plants coming up, all needing water and levels of purification. And now, where will the water go? How do we prioritize that? Does that go to water access for people or water access for energy? And how does this discussion go? Because both water and energy access, reliable, is a right. They're SDGs, right? So I think this nexus is gonna evolve pretty fast in the next 5-10 years. We have hydrogen. You have huge hydrogen companies coming out of China. Of course, Air Liquide is taking over the discussion from the West. But Korea, Malaysia, and Japan are doing big moves on hydrogen, not waiting on other productions or waiting it to be mainstream for cheaper outputs. But they wanted to get ahead because they know that hydrogen is here. The future is here on hydrogen. So policy links, we've got the Agricultural Restructuring Program, the ARP for Vietnam. We have the National Agro-Food Policy for Malaysia. We have the SPIS for the Philippines. We have the Solar Pumping Initiative for Cambodia. We have the Solar Nova program for Singapore. Singapore is a more interesting case, being a highly urban country, and their spaces are dedicated for parks, recreation, and the environment. So they don't have vast land compared to the Philippines that's ready to be converted for power. And of course, Singapore is importing almost everything, including food, including water, including power. So their discussion is a bit more dynamic than the rest of us. And as part of the ASEAN, as their member countries, we also have to keep in mind that whatever we make here can end up in Singapore, may end up in Singapore. And yes, they can buy it. Yes, they can buy at better prices, but we're talking about rights and access. Then we also have the Brunei vision for 2035. So agrivoltaic potential for C, what's agrivoltaic? So agricultural efforts in combination with PV solar. Maybe not even PV solar, but any solar. So that's also CPV and the such. We have figures here, just key ones. High solar radiation in the region, it's about 5 kilowatt hours per square meter. Our agricultural dominance, Indonesia alone has 38 million hectares. I think everyone who's Asian knows how much land we have here. But now there's a question on how do we use it, right? And then solar installation, as mentioned earlier, we're looking at 241 gigawatts by 2050. Now, this 241 gigawatts, do we use it solely for power or do we also use it for agrivoltaics? Another discussion. Rural populations, we've got 30 to 50% of populations in C still living in rural areas. I grew up in a rural area, with the exception of Singapore, being majority urban. And then continuous government support. That's why we're having this discussion here right now and every year. Governments in C have been increasingly aggressive to support both REs and agriculture to nurture the nexus. So while there is no hard policy that prioritizes food or energy over the other in any country for now, or at least not that I'm aware of, happy to be informed. There are several stringent policies in all countries that have multi-layer approvals and analysis on land conversion for energy. So you're gonna have to make a very good business case about it and to talk about how it affects the community itself, not just as a CSR, guys, but like after the CSR, what happens next? It's a generational conversation. And speaking for the Philippines, what are the direct contributions of solar to the Nexus? So here we have floating solar and fish farming. SNAP, Scatic Norway Aboitiz Power has a floating solar project in their Magat hydroelectric dam. There's no fisheries under it, but you can see that you can control water temperatures using solar. And then I know the University of the Philippines having a very expansive fisheries program in UPLB. Are also studying on what happens on the long term for the fisheries being under solar PV panels. And then we have very interesting OEMs on floats. Some of them are able to manufacture and design to also accommodate the fisheries and other aquaculture diversities under it. Not very familiar with that, engineer. But I know the OEMs are able to do it as long as you're also gonna put the time to design with them. And then we have several floating solar test beds in Laguna Lake. And then we have the EDC floating solar farm in the Burgos Reservoir. We say farm because it's producing power, but it's not as huge as what people are planning in the Laguna Lake. And then in terms of agri-solar, the DAs, solar-powered irrigation systems, the SPIS I mentioned earlier, was launched to support rice farmers by using solar panels. So the government can't fully support everyone in the whole country in terms of agricultural SPIS. But now we also have SMEs who's selling very competitively priced solar-powered irrigation systems. And we see the farmers being more techno-inclined for their agricultural efforts. And then lastly, we have agrivoltaics projects in this with CSU and ISU, where solar panels are installed over farmland at their campus. So they're evaluating the effects on crop yield analysis and viability of dual use farming. And I'm pretty sure that Erie has been doing this for a while as well, but I'm not sure on the publicity of the information. And thanks for listening. I know I was talking fast, sorry, but happy to have more discussion after this break. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Now we have the last but not least, my colleague, Sohail. In terms of Sohail, I would like to request you, you worked in Central Asia for a long time. And can you provide some historical context of water energy nexus in Central Asia? and then elaborate the importance of bringing in food security dimension in addressing climate change.
Thank you very much. You said the word history. I was looking at Vince and I said, okay, now I know why ADP hired me. I was in the privatization of Victoria in Australia. We privatized $23 billion of asset. ADB was talking about power reform and EPIRA with Philippines and Indonesia. And I was hired for that. And I'm one of those people, those who know me, I cannot be put into a box. So I crawled out of that box. I was telling my director at that time, we should do solar. In 2001, I did the first solar project in Mongolia. And my colleague, who retired now, like me, he told me, do you see Philippines investing 100 megawatt in a solar power project ever? And what did Victoria say today? 1 gigawatt per year. I really clap people like Vince for making that happen. It's quite emotional in a sense that how the world has changed, how ADB has changed, and how we all have to change if we want to survive climate change. So I like this cartoon that was very famous and I used in a lot of conferences, ministers in Central Asia, where I started working when I first joined. The idea was you are looking for fossil fuel under the ground where your back is burning in the sun. It's time we look up. I think it has been time like this. I wanted to work in Central Asia. I mentioned about history. And I was told, no, you have to do financial modeling, this and that. And then when I pushed enough, I was given a task. Can you write a water energy nexus paper for Central Asia? There is a conference going up. Nobody from ADB wants to go. So as a young 38-year-old at the time, I did. So I'm going to talk a few things about that. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the core. I've traveled extensively in Central Asia those days. Then in 2005, again, I financed quite a large number of projects in all those jurisdictions. So let's start with my first slide. Thank you. This one works. Victoria, it worked for you. It didn't work. Okay. This is one of project in Tajikistan. This spillway during summertime is spilling about 500 water, which is value at a $40 a megawatt hour is about $1 million going down the drain. Whereas downstream, there's a lot of electricity need. They're using 65 cents a kilowatt hour to generate. And that's why ADB has focused on regional cooperation. Because what I figured when I started working on this region, that the job is very simple. Water energy nexus, just put the Humpty back together again. Because that was the central planners of Russia did. You produce water, irrigation, you stop, you send gas during summertime. And when they become independent, everybody started optimizing, it went. So my job was writing that paper was very simple. How do we put Humpty back together again? And I came back from a central planning background or sort of system planning background from Australia. So what happens like that water spilling? These are the 4 photos. The top left, it's Tajikistan. You go during summertime, nice trees, people are drinking coffee, nice weather. You go to Kyrgyzstan, which is tulips just come out in April, everything is good. You move south. The left photo is in Turkmenistan, left bottom, one of our fact-finding mission. It is dry. And then the other photo is a train journey I did from Samarkand to Tashkent to Samarkand. Again, very dry. And that's the dilemma in Central Asia. While people are having fun summertime with their hydro, others are dry, they need water. So I just did some search the last few days. And if you do, Kazakhstan, very dry, summertime. You go to Turkmenistan, this was one of my clients, last project, really, really dry. They have agriculture, it's for the sake of it. It is so much dependent on other people releasing air. You feel releasing water rather, that it's very, very difficult. And then what happens, winter comes in. everything freezes. So the left photo on the top is from one of my project or journey, Kyrgyz Republic, snow-capped mountains around the year. Then the second one is Ashgabat. I think that day when we took the photo was -40 degrees. It's freezing cold. If you go in Tajikistan, people are still inside, indoors, enjoying their shashlik, but it is cold outside. And you go to Turkmenistan, nice boulevard, because that never gets snowed. In the capital, everything okay, but outside there are snows. And what happens, then the situation changes. The Tajikistan, the photo that I was showing you at the beginning, 500 cubic meter going down the drain, wasting electricity, the same country is now freezing because the hydropowers have frozen, most cases. If you run, water will spill over the frozen rivers and waste. And also you have some bilateral agreement with the Kazakhs and Uzbek that I will keep the water for you so that you can have a cotton industry. If you don't, they won't give you gas. It's just the same Humpty putting back together again story. Like Kyrgyz Republic, the left one is my project, the Toktogul hydropower, the last project I did. It is drying. Kyrgyz government is already telling everybody, saying it's going to be very, very dry. Don't expect much water, doesn't matter what we have signed. And this is just newspaper article. I can see, yeah, it's October 2021. So it's a very recent. So Central Asia is a complicated area. If you look at the map, these two countries, Kyrgyz and Tajikistan, like the Nepals of South Asia, they control Amur Darya and Sid Darya basin. And everyone downstairs, starting from Uzbek and Kazakh, rely on them. And Turkmen gets through Uzbekistan. Turkmen is also now negotiating a little bit more with the Afghans to get some water. They need water from upstream countries, no other alternative. And they have, unfortunately, most of Central Asia has very, very inefficient system, whether it's a water supply system, power system. I have never worked in agriculture. I'm trying to be a farmer right now, but I must be efficient as well because it's a lot of pumps involved. So I thought, okay, let me do a bit of research, what my other colleagues in different silos doing. So this is World Bank reservoir, water blog. They're talking about that same thing. Let's de-energize water services. Again, energy efficiency. Then if you look at our, oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong side. Our ADB colleagues also saying, this is a publication water. Again, I know very little, please don't say anything. Regional cooperation, that's where we highlighted, because it's very important. People have to get together and share these regional resources. Then if we, this is another blog. Again, this is where I found, okay, one of the conclusion was adoption of innovative technologies are needed with management of renewable and renewable energy come in, because everything takes water, because this is the limited we have. And we, as a former energy specialist working in ADB, our energy sector objective has been, let's try to put together the Humpty back, connect with everyone as it was. And if it's okay, everything will be fine. We don't care what others are doing, to be frank. That's been the attitude. And I hope with the climate change, now we have to get more focus and we should be able to move forward. So I tried to summarize, okay, what are the main reason, this interdependency? What is the Humpty, the central planners were doing? You see, collapse of Soviet Union, everybody become independent. So the water challenge become an issue. There are a lot of agreement, I think about 8 different agreements, but these are mostly bilateral. What happens, it's very difficult when you have bilateral agreement solving regional issues. It's not all countries are equal, different countries of different size. So conflict, I hope I was able to show it to you, basically is energy production versus agriculture need. Kyrgyz and Tajik sitting outside have a lot of hydropower they control, but the downstream countries need that water, but they need in summer. If you release in winter, it get waste because they are not growing anything. So this continues on, and downstream, upstream countries, the way the central planners build them, there is no coal-fired power station and others for winter because it's supposed to come from somewhere else. So they struggle. If you're in Bishkek, you will be freezing because one of the coal thermal did not work. And it is not fun when it's minus 20 degrees outside. So yes, there are a lot of issues in terms of legal framework, and water conflicts is there. So we have a lot of work. So then I want to say, okay, it's the challenges is remain. I hope I was able to give you a bit of better picture, but it is not. It's an unfinished business in Central Asia. Water energy nexus conflicts are there still. There have been bilateral approaches, not sort of let's get everybody together. I don't think MDBs of the world, we have talked a lot, but I don't think we have been able to deliver much. It's very difficult, independent countries. So I'm very hopeful the new technology might change things differently. It will make traditional regional cooperation very difficult because we could say, okay, Kazakhstan, you have coal, Turkmen, you have gas, Afghan, you don't have anything, we'll connect and export. Now everybody can do solar. If Philippines is planning 1 gigawatt, everyone should. So that changes the dynamic way different. No one need to rely on anyone anymore. But I was also hopeful when I was doing research yesterday that Israel, which has a lot of agri-tech, hydroponic technology, they're talking with Uzbek. Uzbek has invested a lot in hydroponic because I think rather than fighting for the limited water we have, we need to have technology to grow more with less water. So that's what I converted myself. So on the second session, I'll have a different identity and we can talk about that, but you can connect me with this. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohail. A lot of challenges and a lot of work to do. But you have left ADV now. You have to do more as a private entrepreneur. So I think now we have a limited time, about 20 minutes or so, but I think still it's a good time. Actually, some of the colleagues, I do not know whether they are attending here, they have expressed interest in this topic. And I also mentioned that they will have an opportunity to contribute. First, I would like to request Dr. Bernie Jones from the Smart Villages Research Group of UK. They have some innovative smart agri center. And I will also identify other speakers. If you are around, you kindly identify yourself and ask your question to the panel, and also offer your perspectives, because collectively we are learning. The second person is Farhan Rana from the International Renewable Energy Agency in Abu Dhabi. Third, there are colleagues from the Ministry of Environment and Energy in Maldives, Ahmed Akubar. And also fourth, David Lecoq, CEO of the Alliance for Rural Electrification, and Deepak Krishnan from World Resources Institute. If you are there, you are most welcome to offer your perspectives as well as ask questions to the panel members. Dr. Jones, please.
Is it on now? That's fine. Sorry. So I say again, thank you for some very thoughtful points and presentations. So I'm Bernie Jones. I'm from a company called Smart Villages, and what we do is integrated solutions for rural development. So literally everything we do is Nexus. And I was really struck by what you were saying, and it's great to see the ADB showing some leadership on this, because I think it probably has been lacking worldwide from a top-down perspective. We started off, before we were a company, as a 7-year-long research program. And at the end of that program, we went to all the MDBs and international donors and presented our work on why an integrated Nexus approach was necessary. And they all agreed. And then I remember sitting at the World Bank in Washington saying, well, are you going to fund things like that? And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. All of our money is very, very siloed. And I said, but look, you're the energy department. I can see agriculture across the corridor. Couldn't you do something together? No. So I think that's part of the problem. All the guidance that's coming to countries is still very, very siloed. So I guess one question I'd put to you all is, why is that still the case? And what can be done from the top to encourage more of this Nexus thinking? But the other thing that struck me about almost all of the presentations is you're talking about the Nexus in terms of threat and conflict. And that's kind of interesting. And I know it's important. So, you know, water versus agriculture, energy versus agriculture. It would be interesting to see or to hear what your thoughts are about how Nexus can be additive. So we're not just thinking about the problems and the stresses between all the different elements of the Nexus, but how we can actually combine things together. So if we get the agriculture and the energy and the water people to say, actually, how can we do something that boosts all of those things at the same time, instead of how can we make sure that they don't interfere with each other?
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I mean, anyone from the panel would you like to respond to Sohail?
So you want to put Humpty together. And that's what the central planners were doing, identifying what is the best use the resources we have, right? But when all the infrastructure service provider, power supply, water supply, if they're privatized, then the private companies, of course, they have to optimize based on what they have, and their only obligation is the regulatory framework, because the private companies are not interested in developing public goods. So I think it comes back to then to bring everybody together, what sort of regulatory framework we have in place that makes sure there are enough incentive, carrots and stick in different places so that overall it behaves. Russia possibly was doing for the Central Asians through power, but when you want to bring private sector providers, concessionaires to do, it comes back to regulatory framework. Thank you.
I think when you for the Philippines, you see a service contract, you have over 170 signatures, but there's not any part of it that talks about how much water will it take to take care of the land that is being used for the solar power project, how much energy or food is being displaced by having this project here. Now, of course, there is analysis and approvals from the Department of Agriculture with floating solar and offshore solar, possibly discussions with the fisheries and marina. But again, as what Sohail has mentioned earlier, there is no regulatory requirement on making it a hard requirement that the Nexus is part of your project. There is also no incentive for these kinds of projects. So the private sector right now is leading the charge on energy in the Philippines, especially since its privatization a couple of decades ago. Now, as a business, their power purchase agreements are responding to power requirements. So yes, there are energy contracts, but you're right, the discussion on including the Nexus in these contracts have to start. And I'm very happy that we have Sir Vince here in our panel because he's the one most familiar on how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, given the time constraints, actually, there is a question to Vince. I mean, the question is that how has Alter Energy addressed the issue of reliability of solar energy in consistent energy generation? What do you think would be the best RE mix for the Philippines to reach the base load? And there is also another question to Secretary Vince saying, given the Nexus challenges, how did you manage to get the project in Palau up and running?
Okay, so let's start with that. The Pacific Island nation, well, Palau, I guess,
Yeah.
has been revealed. One, we decided not to do massive cutting, as we call it, excavation of the slope, because the more you do that, then you have soil erosion, which then affects the water quality of the downstream river. So the solar farm actually follows the contour they're rolling rather than one straight plane of solar panels in a typical solar farm. So the various arrays actually follow the contour of the slope. Two, we had to build massive trenches along the edges. We had to set back from the forest 6 meters apart, and the trenches protect any water flow that might seep into the forest. And then on the downstream, we have multiple sedimentation ponds, not quite Olympic-sized pools, but similar to that, where we try to capture the sedimentation so that no soil erosion passes through the downstream river. Funny enough, those sedimentation ponds now have become quite popular by saltwater crocodiles that we didn't even expect were hiding in the nearby forest. So they'll be our bodyguards. Now we don't need to hire bodyguards for that one. RE, definitely intermittent power is an issue here. It's creating a lot of grid issues. And I think more and more you're going to see battery farms that just store intermittent power that is not used during the hours. And you're going to see more and more purely battery systems that will be built around. We're looking at that, as a matter of fact, as more and more contestable customers that we're talking to would prefer to have a bit more base load type. We can't do that with solar. We can do that with run-of-river hydros, by the way. Just to answer the other two case studies, the project where the developers trying to sell the project to us, who are paying the rice farmers not to plant so that they become fallow, we decided to pass on that project. We understand it was bought instead by a North Asian company up north. Good luck to them. We didn't want to take the regulatory risk on that one. On the issue of the fish pond by this fourth generation, I think we're going to try to keep the fish operation. We might hire the employees that they have right now. We might do it as a break even. And given that the seasonality of the fish pond, meaning it's not like a lake where it's permanently with water, given that during the rainy season it's flooded, the summer season it's not. We've decided we might build a very tall fixed solar, about 4 meters tall, and we're looking at some technology in Taiwan that has installed fixed solar on shrimp farms. So we'll see if we could apply that technology here in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please. Yes, just briefly. No, I mean, you can make a very brief.
Quickly, a comment on the base load. Do you care about base load on water? You don't. Of course, we demand in the morning people having everyone shower. We don't, because we have a tank. So same thing is happening with electricity. More and more, we'll have batteries at home. We'll have a car with batteries. All appliances will have batteries, fridge, TV, fan. So then there is no concept of base load. So I think I can have a long conversation with this after this, but just keep that in mind. Base load is an outdated concept based on the fossil fuel world and not our inability to store.
Thank you. Please.
Good morning. My name is Clemencia Torres de Mestre. I come from the World Bank, from ISMAP, which is a management of knowledge with regard to all the energy topics. So these two sessions are wonderful because they echo exactly the type of topics that we are discussing. The nexus that is absolutely essential to be relevant, if you want. I had two short comments and a question and two questions. The short comments are the following. First, I beg to disagree. A base load is important because of the continuity and the reliability and the need for aggregation, which doesn't say anything against solar. It just means that solar needs to be integrated within the system. So this is where the transmission and all kinds of things is a whole discussion where you have additional resources. So this is great, but still for productive uses and for real economic development, you need that continuity and that reliability. So in terms of a comment on the positive part of the interaction between of the Nexus, I just wanted to open the floor. There is a very interesting one, which is storage through water. I mean, the capacity and all the opportunities that open if you think about water with pump that allows you to store energy. Yeah, the same solar hydro in countries where I work as an energy economist, but some of the solution is how can we expand the water, the hydropower, even when it is rain over the river, by doing solar. So I think this concept of Nexus can be very positive in that sense, if we think about it. So it's just a couple of, a whole conversation can be there. But I wanted to ask two questions. My first one is, we have discussed this need of the Nexus and many ideas have come at the level of the enterprises, but also at the regulatory levels. But there is one that has not yet been discussed, and I was hoping the first two speakers, Mr. Perez especially, to talk about the governance, but at the highest level. Not, you have given a very good example where you, as one of the minister, was very open-minded and discussed with your fellow Minister of Finance. That's great. But ultimately, for this to be a systematic way of approaching it, you need to have a supra, if you want, at the highest level, above the minister, the mandate to think the way you were doing it. And that part of it is the resource management plan, but that is a tool. The real will come when you will have on the prime ministry, at this highest level, and that goes also to the discussion that you were talking with water. So my question, and I stop here, is among all of you that have been involved, is has there been any example where the mandate come at such a highest level, and that applies also for the multi-development agencies, that the brains and the ones that decide allocation of resources need to have this conversation that you had on one-to-one. Again, thank you for these wonderful 2 sessions. Thanks.
Thank you. Very briefly, because there are 3 points.
Okay, quickly. Thank you. Good questions. And we welcome the role of the World Bank with the Department of Energy. Beatrice Abizu consulted us on convincing the grid operator here that renewable energy is can be managed. So for instance, the biofuels law was a common collaboration between the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Transportation. His main concern was, will it increase fuel prices? That's his main concern. And we had to manage that because obviously cocoa diesel and bioethanol could either increase. So there's a cap as agreed by the biofuels law. But really it was the agricultural lobby that was pushing both of us to accept that. But you have to have 2 like-minded ministers to agree to a biofuels law. Thirdly, I will share with you the discussions between the energy minister today and the environment minister today about whether they should only encourage renewable energy in islands. Remember, we're 7,000 islands here. In islands that are deemed critically in terms of biodiversity. That cannot be, that is a collaboration that they're discussing now. I've discussed this with both of them. And let's see if they can come up with a compromise. But we have some examples where critically high diversity islands here have a coal plant. Should that be the case? So that's a discussion that's ongoing. Again, it may not be driven by the top, but at least it's driven by like-minded ministers. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I'll come next, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alimjan. I'm from Kazakhstan, Ministry of Energy. I came to comment on our colleagues' presentation a little bit because we are more into it, and I want to share some insights. First one is that on the picture, On the picture with the winter, it was Astana, not Ashgabat. It's our capital of Kazakhstan. Second one is that Amudarya, we have in Central Asia, we have two rivers, the big rivers, which one is Sirdarya, which flows through Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and then comes to Kazakhstan. And second one is the Amudarya, which comes from all other countries except Kazakhstan. And the third one is that we have to understand when we see the pictures with the dry weather, we have to understand that historically we have some deserts in Central Asia. It's normal thing. In the future, if you want to understand the situation more clearly, if you want to have the picture what's happening in there with the water supply, I recommend to come to the downstreams countries. It's mostly Kazakhstan. We are now like suffering really hard from the water deficit. We have lack of the water in the Sirdarya because we're like downstream country. And also there were some critics to our bilateral agreements, but I also cannot agree. Like we sure have problems because you see it's different countries, everyone has their own interest, but we are making it quite successfully. I mean, we are exchanging the resources. Someone gives the waters and we give like electricity over the winter time and stuff like that. So and my question is, do you have any other like more maybe even more successful examples where you have these integrated countries which share like 5 countries share one river, and you have like upstream, downstream countries, and where they have like much more better experience in this side? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Actually, there was a similar question raised by Dwight Jason. He was saying the Mekong River Basin provides a good case study on the challenges and opportunities on transboundary water governance. What is your take on the barriers faced by the region on data sharing? I mean, he identified a specific problem, which is really complex among all the countries that have shared resources like water, I mean, rivers. But maybe before that, maybe Sohail would like to address some of the queries.
Thank you for your comments. I hope I did not offend you anyway. I just want, of course, that picture is Astana. I took that picture. Did I say Ashgabat? No, sorry, my mistake. The message that I wanted to give is that, yes, the bilateral, lot of negotiation going on. Every time I went to Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan, they will say, we signed this with Uzbek or Kazakhstan or Turkmen saying we are doing this with Afghanistan. But then what happens sometime when we brought everyone together, we tried to do an energy water forecast here, I believe at ADB 5-6 years ago. Numbers really doesn't add up that much because different ministries thinking with different assumptions, because we are human. So when you try to make sense it all, you see duplication, you see that. So what I said, it may be suboptimal in a way, and that's the academic research saying, when bilateral happening, if you put it together, the covariance of risk and everything goes together. So it may be an optimal. That was my comment. I hope I didn't say anything that will often. Thank you very much. I in general wanted to make the comment. These 2 countries control water. Summer to winter things change. And photos I picked up randomly. I have tons of photos, but I had to pick up. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, Sohail. I think, Alison, please.
Maybe just briefly touching on, yeah, I think the example of the Mekong River Commission is a good one. It's not perfect. Like any transboundary water cooperation mechanism, it's challenging. It's hard enough at the national level, let alone transboundary. So I think as I mentioned, the Carrick Water Pillar, I think that's promising, showing a lot of progress, and will hopefully expand to more countries in Central Asia. But I wanted to pick up on the point on data and information, and I think that's critical for the planning. What we've tried to do in ADB is to promote Nexus approaches, is use water accounting as the starting point. And we've been able to pilot water accounting approaches in several of our countries where we're really trying to look at the Nexus issues. And water accounting can provide a coherent and consistent methodology for basically quantifying hydrological processes and the distribution of water over various competing sectors. It also considers the consumption of water and benefits and services, including ecosystem services that result for consumption. So it provides basically a shared understanding and platform so that when users start talking about allocations, we have a sort of objective sort of data platform to discuss that. So that information element is critical for planning and agreement and allocation among stakeholders. So we've been working with piloting with IHE Delft using remote sensing data in conjunction with GIS data and hydrological model outputs. So that's one aspect. And then also, interestingly enough, emerging is water, energy, food nexus modeling. So under the Carrick water pillar that I mentioned, actually the team there is through a grant through ADB's Water Financing Partnership Facility is looking at being able to model different scenarios, water and energy development scenarios for the Aral Sea Basin region. And they're looking at a wide range of options to try and see where the multiple benefits are, to look at new investments in water and energy infrastructure, and also, for example, operational rules around hydropower resources. So I think the data is an information base, and sharing and cooperation on that is a critical part of the Nexus.
Thank you. Maybe Vince.
Thank you. Our guest from Kazakhstan, just want to share one little story. I was when 20 years ago, President Nazarbayev visited the Philippines, I was assigned as the cabinet minister in attendance, like his escort. We brought him to a wonderful presidential suite at the hotel called Philippine Plaza Hotel, facing the Manila Bay. Opened the window. I said, President Nazarbayev, this is Manila Bay. For coming from a landlocked nation, he was so attracted that we're right by the water, and he wanted to swim right there. I said, no, not Manila Bay, please. Maybe Boracay. Little story to share with you.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
Titankar from WRI. So I'm stopgapping my colleague over here. So just to share one study that we are doing with the Niti Aayog, which is a think tank of Government of India, but not to propagate the study, but the findings of the study. One is that I heard about data and modeling stuff, but one of the things that came out very broadly at the national level is that, look, there are lots of modelings and all these analyses are going forward. But our challenge is that how do we make those findings to the actionable policy? So that's what we are doing. But at the state level, which is the provincial government levels, the problem that we are facing is that, or at least the concern, it's not more of a problem, but the concern is that how these are, so talking to each other is a general problem. We don't get into, we have been talking about that, but how to resolve that? One of the issues is that the energy departments, who are basically implementers of the solar and various kinds of renewable energies, they are not being invited by the water and other departments to actually implement when the water and other departments are sitting on a large pot of budgetary allocation. So many of the states, as you have pointed out, from some of the leadership is required. So there is some of the states who has actually taken leadership in making this as a common pool of knowledge quantum, which we are propagating. And one of the things that has actually worked, which is a program which has been taken up by Kusum, which actually talks about incentivizing the water, not using the excess of water by giving the farmers a connectivity to the grid and pricing them. So that is one way looking forward, because I heard you talking about the Bangladesh is going forward for solarization and water usage. I think that would be a good model to work.
Thank you for those remarks. Actually, we are running out of time. I will just take on the final question, focusing, on the solar irrigation pumps in the Philippines. The question to you is that how are the solar irrigation pumps in the Philippines financed? Is there any government subsidy support? And are these individually owned pumps or community-based pumps? Any elaboration on that?
So in 2018, the DA actually approved a 44 billion peso budget for this. Are they community pumps? Some of there are community pumps. A lot of the local government units are pushing for community pumps so that the farmers themselves don't feel pressured to invest on it themselves. Now, solar pumps for agriculture, for smaller farms, I've seen the budget go from 50 to 100,000. And then for larger farms needing more power, the budget goes from 75,000 to 300,000 pesos. Those prices move not as aggressively as the spot market of solar PV does, because the people who carry the solar panels and the pumps and have the expertise to do the hydropower and agricultural installation already buy these panels by the container. So the panels are not aggressively moving as fast as, for example, Vince's company gets the pricing, because they order a lot more and a lot more dependent on the spot pricing of polysilicon. Um, there since because of this huge demand, the LGUs can't keep up. Now in their plantilla and listings, I don't see any specific energy experts despite this 44 billion fund. And that might not be intentional, but it doesn't help the current situation. Now the farmers have found more support, real-time basis with private installers who do this at a reasonable fee. Like you go on Facebook, you would find probably 100 private SMEs who are able to provide this and will also provide the technical help and would be open to negotiate, because they also want to get the project despite it being small. So yes, the government has funding, 44 billion, but the reaction times to the needs of the farmers isn't as fast as the farmers are expecting. So the private sector has responded by creating their own businesses for them.
Thank you. I think the last word from Vince. I mean, because we are already.
Thank you. Following on that, I just recalled from my memory bank, in the early 2000s, government of Spain, Santiago, you're listening, gave a large grant or loan to the Department of Agriculture to install solar irrigation in multiple agrarian communities in Mindanao. It was really a Department of Agri deal, not a DOE deal, but of course I was there, the inauguration. So that's something we could replicate to help off-grid farming communities in Mindanao get energy from solar irrigation as well. Two, UNDP finances smart city or smart village in El Nido, Palawan, to integrate um, uh, battery and solar, and did a microgrid for these communities in this village in El Nido. UNDP did that. All those information are in the public domain. Those are case studies that are available that we could replicate. And my takeaway from this seminar, I think we should lobby the DOE and the ERC to come up with a slightly higher feed-in tariff or gear for agrovoltaic. So it's not just on-grid solar, but give a little bit more premium for those that do agrovoltaic or aquavoltaic, just to encourage the food energy nexus remains there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, the last session is very, very useful. We will have the next session in about 20 minutes. So I do not want to summarize this session because we are already 10 minutes late. So kindly come back at 11 o'clock to know more about the case studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohail. And good morning, everyone. So I'm glad that Sohail started this off with a notice to everyone that we can keep this informal. I'd rather keep this informal and make it as interactive as possible. So just a few lines of introduction of myself. So I'm Mona Lisa Di Malanta. I currently am the chairperson and CEO of the Energy Regulatory Commission of the Philippines. So I assumed this post in August of last year. Prior to this, I was the chair of the National Renewable Energy Board for 2 years. I was also a partner in a law firm, Puyat Jacinto and Santos, I was practicing focused on the field of energy for more than 20 years. So I'm following Ruth's lead. I'm only 25 years old, but already practicing. I have already practiced for more than 20 years. But just to say that I'm very familiar with the Philippine sector, very curious about how our counterparts in other jurisdictions, in other countries also experience this exciting field of energy. So I think it goes to say, since I've been in this industry for more than 20 years, that I've really enjoyed practicing in this industry, learning a lot in this industry. And I hope at this time during my tenure at the Energy Regulatory Commission to contribute to the growth of this industry as it has evolved significantly from the time I first joined the industry in 2021 to today, to 2001 to today. It's a totally different animal, so to speak, that we have in this industry. So I don't know if you would like me to proceed with the keynote or just introductions first of all the speakers. Okay.
Sorry, I think the best would be introduced and then you.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
Thank you.
So I'm okay, you see the slides. These slides I prepared, but I'll go through them very quickly because these are meant to just provoke discussion. These are not meant to lecture. I do not, I am also a professor, but today I don't like to lecture because it's a Friday. So let's see. So I start off with some sort of mindset framing. I've always liked this quote from E.F. Schumacher, one of the economists, and he said this many decades ago. He said that energy systems are not just another commodity, but a precondition to all commodities, a basic factor equal with air, water, and earth. I think this, I always try to, whenever I get caught up in the details of the work, and we do a lot of administrative stuff in the Energy Regulatory Commission, day-to-day stuff of running the office. Sometimes you find yourself getting caught up in this, in these details of life that you have to deal with. But I always, whenever I feel like I get caught up in these things, I always remind myself of what's really important. And this quote from Schumacher is always a breath of fresh air. It always underscores how important the work is, not just of the Energy Regulatory Commission, but all of us who are part of this system. Because I think what this quote articulates is the fact. So of course, it's important, the point that this is a basic factor and all these things. But to me, for today, at least, what resonates is the fact that this is a system. So a system cannot be decided on by just one area of the one sector of society. It needs to be decided on collaboratively by all sectors, and we need to be conscious of all our roles in this system that we all live in, and that underscores the lifestyle that we want to have or that we want to achieve. So in the Philippines, just as a very brief introduction, the Philippine energy industry is currently a 630 billion peso industry. If we all realize the plans of the Department of Energy, and I'm sure in the other tracks, there were speakers from the DOE, by 2040, this industry is projected to be a 7 trillion peso industry. Currently, so flash forward and then flash back to today. Return to today. Today, we already have more than 200, this is 230 as of May, but we have actually increased the numbers over the last month. So more than 230 generating companies, operating almost 600 power plants in all the islands of the Philippines. We have a functioning wholesale electricity spot market, trading every 5 minutes of the day, with 436 participants in that market. We also have a retail supply market currently with more than 120 suppliers operating in that market, servicing, I think, almost 2,000 retail customers as of today. And we have 141 distribution utilities all over the country. So the Energy Regulatory Commission is the body that's enacted or that was established under the Republic Act 9136. That's the law that deregulated the power industry in the Philippines in 2001. This agency is supposed to oversee what I showed earlier on the participants of this sector. I share this slide with you because I mentioned earlier that this animal is no longer the same animal that was introduced to us in 2001. Since 2001, this industry has grown in terms of capacity by more than 100%. The installed capacity of renewable energy sources alone since 2008, when the RE Act was passed, grew by more than 2,000 megawatts. The installed capacity since 2000, if we look at generation, on the other hand, quite ironically, the share of renewables have decreased from the time the RE Act was passed in 2008. When the RE Act was passed in 2008, the share of renewables in the Philippines was almost 35% already in terms of generation, megawatt hours. It has reduced, and I think to today still stands at around 23-24%. So and I know most of you are already familiar with this sector. The Department of Energy has increased the target, not the target, the quota for all distribution utilities and retail electricity suppliers have increased their quota of sourcing renewables from just 1% of their total demand to now 2.52%. That increase of 2.52% brings us back to the 2008 levels of 35%. That's the only thing that it achieves. But the goal is to increase that by 2040 to more than 50%. So first we have to go back to 35%, and then we target by 2040, more than 50% of generation in the system should be sourced from renewables. In terms of the grid, in terms of transmission line length, this has increased since 2000, I think 2009. It's not shown in the slide, but 2009 was when the system was privatized. The operation of the system was privatized. Since then, the line length has increased by 7.5%. This one, if there is a, if there's a pointer, there's no pointer, but I would underscore this and circle around it because this is crucial when we talk about increasing renewables and the capacity or the absorptive capacity of the system. For those 3,000, I show here 3,000, but later you'll see a more staggering number of renewables that we aim to have in the system. So this has to, we're working on it. We have some ideas also with the Department of Energy and the National Grid Corporation to address this issue. In the meantime, I think we have to recognize and we have to confront the reality that since 2001, when the law has deregulated the power industry, the utilization of coal in particular has increased by almost 200%. And that's the reality. We need to recognize this in order for us to address this. Confronted with this, as I mentioned earlier, we are trying to grow the utilization of renewables in the system. Currently, we have 165 generation companies operating 230 generation facilities all over the country. That's one story in itself. But I think the real story, if you see the data on the slides, we only have about 19 renewable energy facilities operating in the off-grid islands. And these are the islands that are not connected to the main system in the Philippines. And this is where I think the real story will happen if we want to grow the impact of renewables in our system. This is where also I think the nexus is real. The nexus is real, of course, also though, as I'm sure you had discussed this morning. The nexus is real, of course, everywhere. It's real also in the main grid. But if we're looking for immediate impact, the off-grid areas, the displacement of fossil fuel utilization in the off-grid areas is where immediate impact can happen. And this is where the invitation, I highlight this because this is an invitation. This is a call for everyone in this group. Maybe we can brainstorm, how do we really make renewables, how do we realize the impact of renewables and its its potential, explore its potential in the off-grid areas, because that's immediate, that's quantifiable even in these areas, and it's sustainable for most of these off-grid areas. A lot of these areas are not even candidates to be connected to the grid. So they will remain off-grid for a considerable length of time because the demand is really low. It's not viable to connect them to the main grid. So we need to address them where they are at the moment. So aside from this, and this is the other, I think the second part that I invite us to maybe linger on today, because if we're looking for a platform where that nexus, a set of parameters where the nexus can be realized, these are some of the programs that currently exist that can allow for that nexus to be realized and optimized. One, the Distributed Energy Resource Program. The framework for this have already been passed by the Energy Regulatory Commission last year. And there are already a lot of interests signified to develop DER's distributed energy resources. Earlier, I caught the tail end of the first session, and former Secretary Vince Perez was talking about, how can we promote aquavoltaic and all these projects. This is one platform. This is one program that can host those types of project. The other one is I'll skip a bit. I'll talk about that. The other one is the microgrid law, because it's similar to the DER program, but I think more investment intensive, because it requires the establishment of network of wires for microgrid systems. But it can also be a host for the realization of the fruits of the nexus for water, energy, and food. The other programs can also be on a smaller scale basis, particularly for the net metering program. There are a lot of small programs already, or small projects already for solar irrigation projects that are installed in various parts of the Philippines, but still on demo mode. Maybe it's time we scale them up and really make these projects graduate from demo mode to commercial utilization. The Department of Energy also has this program called Productive Uses of Renewable Energy, PURE, and that's one area where if the generation exceeds, for example, the generation of the facility, whether it's a solar facility or a wind or hydro facility, exceeds the irrigation requirements, then they can sell to the distribution utility under the net metering program. I think that's one area that's been unexplored so far. A lot of the net metering customers you see here, we have more than 8,000 end users. These are home users. These are solar home systems that have been installed. But the program doesn't disqualify agriculture utilization or other industrial utilization to sell their excess to the system. The Green Energy Option Program is similar to our retail consumer program, competition program, with a lower threshold. This is only as long as you, I think the average use is 100 kilowatts, then you can enroll and choose suppliers from RE developers. The Green Energy Auction Program, this is one of the more exciting if you're looking for scale program. But some of us, I think the beauty of the Nexus is that it can work for small scale and utility scale projects. But if you're looking for scale, then the Green Energy Auction Program is a program that you're looking at. The first auction was already concluded. The Department of Energy is looking to conduct the second auction very soon. And just as of last night, why is it not moving? To the back. Okay. There. Okay, so just last night, and you're, I think, the first group to which this will be revealed, the Commission has issued the final green energy auction rate. So this works as a cap for the auction for 5 technologies: rooftop solar, ground-mounted solar, floating solar, onshore wind, biomass, and waste to energy. So if this, and of course, we all hope that this program will be successful. Once this program is successful, the DOE is looking to award contracts for more than 11 gigawatts of renewables. I think, to be exact, 11.6 gigawatts of renewables allocated over the 5 technologies that I mentioned here. So we're all very excited about this, and we all want this capacity to be realized in terms of the suppliers to the main grid, as I mentioned earlier. So you've all taken pictures, but but we can share the slides anyway. It's public by now. Yes, good. Okay, we want to share this with as many people as possible. But aside from that, we're working on several projects, several programs still. And this is, if I can, pick all your brains, if you have suggestions on how we can incorporate already the Nexus dimension for all of these works in progress, I invite you to please send share your thoughts with us on how we can, because this is a good time now that we're having this conversation, because nothing is final yet in terms of these rules. So you can, but a lot of them are almost final stage. But if you can incorporate already, if you can share already your thoughts on how we incorporate the Nexus in these programs, we would very much welcome it. For example, in energy storage system policy, how would you envision the Nexus to be a dimension or a parameter of this policy that we want to achieve? Earlier, Secretary Vince mentioned that maybe he was talking about the feed-in tariff, but I don't think, to be honest, the Department of Energy is still keen on doing a feed-in tariff. The best that we have is the auction, but also the pricing structure or the cost structure for the energy storage system. Is there anything there that we can still develop? Because that one we're still working on. So if there's anything there that you'd like to contribute to promote the optimization of this Nexus, then you can share your thoughts with us. Of course, we're still completing the reset for the transmission utility rates, the distribution utility rates. We're also developing a program for peer-to-peer trading. And these are the exciting parts, because we'd like to adopt in the regulatory commission. That's why I dispute Sohail's statement earlier that it's not fun. It is fun, because we're trying to adopt a sandbox approach for peer-to-peer trading and other smart grid also. We're trying to get out of the box in terms of regulation formulation. So if you have thoughts, we very much welcome it. Of course, we're together with the Department of Energy, we're revising the guidelines for power supply procurement by distribution utilities. In the Philippines, this is called the CSP, or Competitive Selection Process Guidelines. Very exciting also, because it's almost at the tail end at the DOE side. They might publish it next week. And then the work transfers to us to the regulator to develop the implementing guidelines. The ancillary services procurement has been completed, at least for the first round, by the grid operator. The work now is to us to evaluate all those ancillary services procurement. But ancillary services also very important discussion when we talk about renewables. And we're consolidating finally all the retail competition rules into one set of rules. We call the Omnibus Retail Market Rules. If there's anything there also, I think there are potential areas there that we can improve on to recognize this water, energy, and food nexus. Then we can work on those as well. So finally, to end at least this introduction, I share this quote from UN Water that I think underscores what we are what we are about to talk to today, which is that water, food, and energy form a nexus at the heart of sustainable development. Again, not stand-alone items, but towards the same goal of sustainable development. Agriculture is the largest consumer of the world's fresh water resources, and water is used to produce most forms of energy. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to learning more a lot from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona Lisa. That was very good. I like the bit that you said about being open to ideas and others, because regulators' job is tough. I used to work for one of them in Australia, and we are told always that your job is to make sure everyone is equally unhappy. If they are happy, that means you left something on the table. So I like the first slide that you have, that the quotation that energy is nothing that people consume. It's the goods that energy produce. So what I want to share right now, a video, it's just 2-minute video that fascinated me. I think this was a pilot project done in Australia, 2016, how water, food, and everything works together. And I'm also very happy that some of my Central Asian colleagues there, I wanted to do one of those projects, but then I decided to retire. But I think it's an amazing market in Central Asia where you have a lot of energy, you have a huge solar potential, but traditional grid can only take those energy that far. But if you convert into food, you can ship it anywhere. So I think that's very important. Our Turkmen colleagues were interested, and I haven't had a direct opportunity to work with Kazakhstan and others, but I think this will be a food for thought. We want to talk more about it. So let's have the video first. Thank you. If you're interested, this company, again, I have no shareholding in this company, has tons of videos out there. This is a video from 2016 that inspired me to do something on the agriculture sector, growing food, make an action. And that's why I want to introduce to two other speakers, Lauren and Cheska. We three are the co-founders of a company which is trying to help everyone grow hydroponics. And these plants are there for a purpose. I mean, this was growing actually in my balcony this morning. I said, okay, my helper said, sir, this is too old. I said, no, but it is fresh. So I hand over to Cheska and Lauren. You may want to introduce yourself and take you through. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohail. So yes, I'm Chaska Ramirez. So I'm one of the co-founders of Grow It Yourself. And
I'm Lorraine Wang. I used to be with ADB for the past 22 years. I was the advisor of Office of Anti-Corruption and Integrity. And I was also with U.S. Government Accountability Office for about 10 years prior to joining ADB. So I have over 30 years of auditing, integrity, investigation, experience. As other panels, I'm also 25.
yeah, and my background, I've been in the waste industry and sustainability industry for over 10 years. So I was part of the company that kind of started everything when hazardous waste was being focused on here in the Philippines. And yeah, I was brought on board because I've been with my sustainability background. So I was kind of the sustainable kind of person in the group. So to move forward, just a little background as to why we started Grow It Yourself. So if you have been here in Manila, as we have been based here during the height of the pandemic, food was such a big issue. So not only were prices so high during that time because of inflation and all those logistic costs that just really drove the prices to be insane for a lot of people who were unemployed or underemployed. It was also difficult to even just purchase these goods. So people would line up in the groceries for hours just to get to shelves that were not well stocked or to find aisles of produce with subpar quality because there were so much delays in terms of the trucks coming from these northern provinces coming to Metro Manila. And so, yes, it was very difficult to actually purchase food, to buy food. And it came to a point that community pantries were a phenomenon here in the Philippines. And I'm not sure if our foreign guests here are familiar with the concept of a community pantry. It is these local community outposts where people would donate food. And the ones who are able to donate, they give. And then the ones who need food are able to take as they need. So this is something that really just pushed us to think about the whole agriculture sector as a whole. Because we thought that why would we need to depend on so many produce, tons and tons of produce in the far-flung areas in the provinces, which take about 3, 4, 6 hours, sometimes 10 hours to get to Metro Manila, if we can bring the farms directly in the communities. And so that was our mission, was to enable everyone to grow their own food with hydroponics. So with our experience as a group, we found all sorts of systems online. So I'm sure that if some of you had also gotten the hobby of growing plants during the pandemic, you've seen all sorts of systems online. And what we have found was there's still such a big barrier to entry in terms of hydroponics because you buy the systems, which are sometimes $300 to $400 for only this much plants. And they don't give you any instructions on how to do it, how to maintain it. And that's the same issue that a lot of people in the communities were also facing when they try to do their own hydroponic systems. It was, how do we do this? It's expensive if we want to set it up ourselves. And also having the right sunlight for the industrial or the commercial suppliers. They found that the energy costs for these plants, to power these plants, are very costly. So what we wanted to do as Grow It Yourself, we wanted to reduce farming carbon footprint by using more sustainable hydroponic practices and educate and enable women with skill transfer and capacity building, and to shorten food miles by bringing the farms right in the communities, as well as bringing the live plants, which will continually grow and be continually consumed right in the establishments and as well as the homes of people. So we utilize the traditional hydroponic systems as well as locally made grow it anywhere systems with hybrid solutions that require less capital to set up with a quick mobilization and installation time. So we would like to really shorten the gap or lower the barrier to entry for people who would want to grow.
So this is our team. The ones who are here, please raise your hand. Wow, thank you. So aside from the photo, we also have Jim Lynch, who is our senior advisor of the team. Thank you, Jim. And Ria also joined us. She is our Central Asia experts. So we all came from different backgrounds. We bring in different expertise, but there's one thing we share is we're all very passionate and very committed to contribute a better and a greener world. Oh, by the way, in case ADB staff sees Samir, she is a moral support. Is her husband TC is our members. Just to clarify. Okay. So as Cheska said, I would like to take you all through our journey from the very beginning. And this one started with indoor growing that we use grow lights in a controlled environment to grow hydroponics. This is a photo from our growth site, Amasolo Rockwell. The picture on the right is one of our staff who is an agronomist who's training our staff on how to better take care of the plants and the hygiene, etc. So just give you some context. About 55 square meters, you can plant about 10,000 plants if you are very efficient. Okay, so after this, we were thinking, energy is expensive. Electricity is very expensive especially in the Philippines, in the whole Asia. So we say, well, why don't we try something different? So we take it to the rooftop. They say, let's experiment on the rooftop. And so we did. The picture on the left is in the Makati, one of our growth site, in an apartment rooftop. What you saw there is Joy is planting. And the photo on the right, that's in one of the resort in Cemetel, right? Okay. So again, I have been capturing Joy's time spent for hydroponic. So she clocking about 7 hours per month. So that's an average of only about 15 minutes taking care of the plants on the rooftop, and you only see one area. So the point is, once we transfer the knowledge and set up the system, it doesn't take much time. And everything I'm taking you through the journey, it can be scaled up. And every building has a rooftop. And there's so many opportunities in this world. Wherever you're from, we can do the same. And then, we can have fresh vegetable, fresh herbs right on our rooftop. Now, we're very big on also transferring our capacity and knowledge to people who want to learn. So this one is our workshop that we ran for Rockwell Club residents. We have, you see the picture, hands-on technology, showing them how to do it from the seed to seedling, and people had a wonderful time. We also formed a community in a WhatsApp group. So then subsequently, they continue bring the boxes home, and then they have questions, and they share with the community. We help, when they see problems, we help analyze and give solutions. Likewise, we provide training workshops also to hotel staff. This is one of the 5-star hotel who engage us to provide capacity building so that now they can grow their own herbs for their restaurants. Cannot get fresher than live plants, right, in the hotel for the restaurants. And I would like to point out the middle part that's Nila. Nila is supporting us. She is Sohel's helper, but she has become an hydroponic expert, working with us, and she is helping the participant, explaining and showing them how to do it properly. So throughout the journey, we like to build up women and like to continuously transfer knowledge so that they can have a better future as well. So we also have deployed some boxes to hotels and to bars. This we get very good comments, like, these kind of boxes, you can sit right there, customer can smell, it's very fragrant, and whatever they need, they can just cut and then make the drink, etc. directly. I don't know what happened. Like,
Yeah, but to add on to that, the thing that really attracted the customers, the restaurants, the hotels, is that these plants will continue to grow. And so for them, food wastage accounts for 30% of all their orders. So if we could bring the live plants there, and then they would just require some maintenance and then could harvest and then continuously grow, then therefore, essentially that 30% wastage of plants that would be brought there would be significantly reduced.
and that's precisely why I really enjoy this startup company, because I myself love to cook. And anytime I buy any herbs, if I can find the one that I like, the one that I need from grocery store, it does not last for more than 2 days, and it wilted and smells different, very difficult to store. So I wholeheartedly believe in the mission, and I really enjoy the company and helping people to grow. Moving forward, so when we have extra basils that we produce a lot, we also teach our staff how to bottle, how to make pesto. So this is another skill transfer to our team, and to help them to have this entrepreneurial opportunity to think outside the box, that you can have generate additional revenue. You have additional side job, you have additional skills. So they were all very happy to eating pasta, after their hard work. It's not hard work, it's just 15 minutes a day looking after plants, and then, you can enjoy the fruits.
Yeah, if I may add to that, these entrepreneurial opportunities are something that we really highlight with the women that we bring onto the team. Because the thing that they say is that, yes, we grow, but example, for a kilo of basil, it would be 200 pesos. So we highlight the opportunities of actually creating finished goods and even more products that they can be able to use to get more income. Because from 200 kilos of basil, which is actually about, for 1 kilogram of basil, which is about 5 to 6 boxes of these, what they could do with that, they could exponentially create, let's say, 2,000 pesos for a 500-gram bottle of pesto. So that's something that we really teach the people, and that the women that we put on board, is that all these different opportunities that they can do after farming as well.
And it really tastes different from store-bought. When they were making the pesto, the hotel clients already approaching, say, "Oh, it smells so good. We can smell it from the 3rd floor, the 4th floor." So it's very nice. Okay. So now we see other opportunity in many unused space. For example, this is an unused front yard in residential areas, and some of the extra space in the backyard that we put a hybrid hydroponic system for the family, so then they can continuously enjoy vegetable, herbs. Now, just think big, right? Imagine you look around, so many car parts, so many empty lots, right? The lots that haven't been built for years, and even your front yard, you have some alleyway, any of those space. We have sun, we put the system, then you have fresh vegetable, fresh herbs to enjoy. And we feel that this is something we can bring globally, and we can help people anywhere, especially, with very healthy, no pesticides food. You know where your food came from, and that's just wonderful. Okay. So then we were requested by a 5-star resort in Boracay to do a feasibility study. On the left, you see that our teammates were doing the ocular inspection and looking for the space where to put. So this project, we did a detailed design for about 16,000 plants in the unused space in the resort. With my background, I have audited like 100 of ADB projects. So feasibility study or concept paper, it's a piece of cake. we know how to capture the facts and how to gather the information, and it has to be accurate, because I'm an integrity person from OEI. Okay. So once again, I'm very proud to say that we have transformed women, our women staff, who used to be basic blue-collar workers like Nina, so housemaids, or they could be janitors, but now we build them up. We transfer skills, we transfer knowledge. More importantly, we transfer the confidence that they have. They become a different persona, and then they are so proud of their skills. Like Nina can teaching and showing participants how to grow So our ultimate objective, which I truly believe coming from development world, is we really want to empower women to break the poverty cycle so that you give them opportunity to help themselves and then they help their family. And then, ultimately we want them to have a beautiful life and everybody enjoy, better life. Like my motto is life of happiness, creativity, and service. So our ambition is global. We have received many interests from different countries. We have signed NDA, the non-disclosure agreements, with teams from various countries like Singapore, Australia, in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan. We also have team there, Mongolia, East Asia, and South Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So any country that I haven't mentioned that you have an interest, you would like to join our exciting journey, we'll be around after the session to help you and then, to answer any question that you may have. But for now, I'm hoping that you will scan this QR code so we will have this Asia chapter of Grow Yourself community WhatsApp group that's keep in touch and let's continue to learn from each other. Happy to help with anything you need and any question that you have. With this,
Yeah, just to wrap up, sorry. So our global ambition is really to push forward low-cost hydroponic systems and low barrier to entry systems so that even places with underutilized space or low supply of water or places which don't necessarily require artificial grow lights. And so that's where agriculture and energy comes in, is because that we could put the nexus together and then utilize or some sort of kind of collaboration with solar companies to actually help subsidize the power for these systems, because a lot of the issues that we have found with the local suppliers is that the cost of electricity is just too prohibitive to scale up into the capacity that would affect real change in terms of the food supply. So this is where Grow It Yourself really does come in, that we want to push forward these easy hydroponic systems to be able to empower everyone to grow.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Now, those who are thinking, why am I here? I'll connect the dot at the end of the day. I mean, how we can make a dent. So don't lose your patience. We get very passionate to be able to grow our own food. And there is a huge aspect of creating meaningful life for especially women, disadvantaged women. And I think that's why on my right-hand side, we have this champion who has not been just renewable energy expert, also on many gender issues. I don't want to undermine by saying anything, Ruth. Maybe you can introduce yourself and say a few words. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sahel. I love all the photos with you in it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like different
I've got
angle.
2 daughters. I've been giving gender balance all my life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to comment on the basil. Did you know, a bit of trivia, that if it grows flowers, it's aging. So you need to cut it so it grows vertically. Trivia. Sorry, I'm also a plantita. I have a roof deck and I think I should scale it because I grew all these herbs during the pandemic and grow cucumber, etc. So let me segue towards what I do. I've been in the renewable energy space for more than 20 years. So I started building, developing wind farms, solar farms, rooftop solar. But my passion is helping women, especially in underprivileged areas. We have more than 100,000 women in our community. 80% of that is in the Philippines, and the rest are spread all over Singapore, Pakistan, the Middle East, Taiwan. So how is this? For me, it's very personal, right? How do you get women to be involved in the future of work? For example, right, during the pandemic, all of us woke up one day and said, oh my God, we're locked down. What do we do? In 2020, the UN Women invited us to speak in a forum wherein women, like how can we help women, and there were all sorts of things like violence against women. But women, technology for us is a game changer. We train women in artificial intelligence the way the Barefoot Academy, right? They train the Lolas. Why do they do that? Because they know that if they train the grandmothers, they will not leave the community. They will be there because there's their grandchildren, their daughters, their sons. And for us, women are a vital part of the community. Like if you empower them, especially in artificial intelligence, which we do, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a tech person. We found out that when we train women in AI, they come up, they deliver. These are fishermen's wives, farmers' wives, grassroots women in conflict areas. It's amazing. So who knows about ChatGPT here? Do you use ChatGPT? Yeah, it's part of my my research was done with ChatGPT. But did you know that AI, for AI to learn something, it needs millions and millions of data. Now, who provides that? It's the human in the loop. And for us, it's the women. We have trained about 1,000 women in artificial intelligence data annotation. It's an acronym called IDA. And we give them work from home opportunities. Let me tell you the story of Geraldine, who's in Palawan. And she's a fisherman's wife, no background in tech, got married early. She thought that was it for her. So together with the UN Women, we were able to find her, trained her, and now she is a contributor to the family income, to her fisherman's husband. But solar, she uses solar to power, to charge her gadgets, right? Which never was there before. So for us, it's a game changer. I was also thinking that, the 110,000 women, maybe if we can have 5-10% of that growing this, grow your own vegetables, sorry, grow it yourself, right? Grow it yourself, be part of that so that the Nexus, you complete that. Because when you empower women, you empower the entire community, right? So I leave it at that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I like the passion and energy. Ruth, we need to talk a lot. Yeah. And let's welcome back Ancha, who's talking to about a project in the GMS region, right? Ancha, you want to take, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, this is slightly different from hydroponics, but we are looking at the issue of water, food, energy nexus through a demonstration project focusing on dragon fruit farming. Vietnam has just begun cultivating dragon fruit enormously, and 80% of it is going to China as an export commodity. But this case study is really looking at energy, water, and food and climate nexus. And why they are going for dragon fruit, I want to just briefly explain. Next slide, please. Or maybe I can use the... Yeah, the lower Mekong Delta is very much known as the rice bowl of Vietnam. They have been traditionally growing rice for a long time, but they are facing a lot of new challenges. There are, already 6 challenges are identified. One is like a sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. And you can see that map, it's continuously growing, saltwater is intruding. And basically because of that, rice cannot survive. Rice is traditionally grown, but the rice fields have gone now. In addition, another climate stress, drought is a major factor in that region. And also happening land subsidence through not only construction, but also aquifer overexploitation of the aquifer. And the soil structure also is getting damaged. More in this region is acid sulfate soils. So again, normal crops cannot grow further. And besides, there is also hydropower dam development in the upstream that is also restricting the flows of the freshwater supplies. And that is the reason why farmers who traditionally used to grow rice are thinking of moving to other crops. And one crop that caught attention by many farmers in this region is the dragon fruit. The dragon fruit actually is very highly profitable, I mean, currently, because there is a sort of significant market. PRC is interested in buying whatever is produced there in Vietnam. So, but there are many challenges. I mean, here we took dragon fruit farming as a sort of case study for assessing this energy, water, food, climate nexus. So what is happening is basically we looked at in a three-stage approach. What are the first order impacts in relation to those four areas: energy security, food security, water security, and ultimately climate security. So the basic demand is when you want to grow dragon fruit, there is the high energy demand compared to rice cultivation. So the why? Because it needs the lighting. I don't know how many people are familiar with growing dragon fruit. Actually, the dragon fruit flowers only when there is good moonlight. And there are only 3 crops in a year. So they are trying to substitute the moonlight with artificial light, which obviously needs energy. Secondly, the water consumption. I mean, although it is relatively tolerant, the root system is relatively tolerant to salinity, but it also needs fresh water. I mean, so that water also, I mean, extraction and supply also requires energy. So basically the implications and when you consume more energy, of course, it has implications for greenhouse gas emissions, etc. And in this area, as I mentioned, the drought or saltwater intrusion, land subsidence, all those factors, it has direct implications on food security. I will not go into the deep, the first order impacts, but this is only an approach as a research. And from water security angle also, if you look at it, as I mentioned, this needs irrigation. And there again, there is impacts on water because you cannot use the groundwater. You cannot use groundwater because it's already very saline. So where do you get it from? What this picture is showing is basically, I mean, it's a bit detailed picture, and in view of time constraints, I will not go. There are some positive impacts and also negative impacts. So we need to look at the second order impacts, and then this is the third order impacts. So for each crop that is grown in the Mekong, I mean lower Mekong, so we are looking at, this is just a small case study of $150,000 demonstration. It is being done in collaboration with Vietnam Southern Institute of Water Resources under MARD, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So it is a sort of exploratory study. How do we really optimize the priorities of energy security, food security, and climate security, of course, water security in the context of dragon fruit farming? So I will go to this. This is the simple example. So how do we want to manage? So if you look at the energy consumption, in the first column, kindly look at the rice, traditional rice. So that is something like 9 to 16 kilowatt hours per hectare per year in terms of energy consumption, and water consumption also similarly. So that is looking at the energy part, then water part, then the food security part. What is the crop productivity and the associated farm income? Then we are looking at the GHG emissions from climate security angle and the vulnerability index, how far that rice is really affected by impacts of climate change, especially sea level rise and other things. So the high vulnerability, that is number 8, is the higher vulnerability. So then we have other system, dragon fruit, traditional irrigation. Again, if you look at the energy consumption, it is up. Water consumption, it is up. Crop productivity is also up. Farm income is also growing because it's there is a assured market. But on the other hand, the greenhouse gas emissions and vulnerability index is slightly reduced. And there is a automated irrigation system that is being tried out. There again, I mean, there is a drip irrigation. So there again, the water energy consumption is increasing and water consumption is decreasing because we are using the drip irrigation, so more efficient use of. And crop productivity is not affected. It is roughly similar, but the farm income has gone up because they are not spending more on water and the greenhouse gas emissions and the vulnerability index. So we are trying to look at the potential ideal situation. This is not realized yet. The demonstration is still in the sort of early stages of implementation. So if we use the LED instead of normal lights, so there is a sort of energy consumption is going to be decreasing. And also with the drip irrigation also, the water consumption is going to decrease. So these are some target values that we are estimating, but these are yet to be looked into. So these are the 4 ways we are looking at in this dragon fruit farming in Lower Mekong Delta. This is just in the early stages of demonstration. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ansha. Now, let me try to connect the dots. And before I do that, I'll also suggest Kina sitting there, giving you a card, which is an NFC card. If you tap, and you will connect to a Dropbox where you can download all the sort of files of the presentations if you want. So Kina has it there. Thank you, Kina. Now let me connect the dots. Can I have the box? Yes, I'm getting old, I'm retired, what else? Okay, you must be thinking that what this box got to do with climate change, why should I care? Can I have the thing?
Yeah, yes.
So what happened, hydroponics is just now where solar used to be 20 years ago. When I tried to do first ADB solar project in Mongolia, that's what my boss told me, the bottom right hand, saying a tiny 100 watt system, who cares? And now we are talking about 1 gigawatt. Whether it is this box is very simple, nothing. Oh, this looks a bit ugly, but normally, but this was growing outside. This has been more than 3 months old. I just grabbed it from my balcony. Just think this as a tiny solar panel. You can do this. You can buy commercial product, many out there. So it's a tiny system that can do 10 to 30 plants in a hydroponic. Here there is 8. So just imagine this is similar to your tiny 30-watt solar panel. If we took to the next step, you can put this on a roof, could be 100 to 25,000, a community garden system. Similar to 5 to 10 kilowatt solar system, that's very common today. When we put this ADB roof, 570 kilowatt, more than 10 years ago, a lot of discussion, will the roof fall, da. Now nobody cares. You can walk around, community solar panel is very common. Now, if we take it to the next stage, that a $500 system, say 500 plant capacity, it can produce to 20 to 30 kilogram of basil, coriander, lettuce, whatever you do, giving revenue about $100 to $150. So then it can create an SME. Young women sitting at a house, trying to study, might borrow somewhere $500, and if gets a regulatory incentive, and then can produce with a very little time, as Lauren mentioned, an income for herself. And then if you can say, what about if the government or a community got together, did a 50,000 plant system, it will be maybe $50,000 for 100 households. Go to a community. And then you can say, okay, a cluster which is 50 community garden cost about $2.5 million. That can be a project ADB will finance, because the basil that I cut it here did not travel at all. I grew it here. But if it's coming from Baguio, that has traveled a lot of kilometers. So if we continue with that logic, that's our plan for a national scale up. At the MDB community, people always say, show me a $50 million project. This is a $50 million project, a cluster with 20 cities, hydroponic scale up. And you know, the good thing is, I have done a lot of projects in the bank. I was a mission leader with at least 10. It takes 10 years to see the fruit of your work. Feasibility study, procurement, implementation, and this is amazing. You see the results within 4 weeks. And nature doesn't lie. It's a very basic first principle sign. It needs only 3 things: carbon dioxide, sunlight, and a bit of nutrient, it grows. And so it's a fantastic scale up, whether it is in Philippines or in Bangladesh or in Afghanistan or anywhere in Central Asia, because I travel extensively. It's very hard to find fresh produce in Central Asia because it's a barren land. All this needs and water. Even in Kazakhstan, if you establish an underground water system, the plant can grow. Because right now, if you do a surface irrigation, drip irrigation, a lot of water gets wasted. So I want to connect this. Like in Australia, we had until 2010, almost zero solar power. Right now, we have 30,000 megawatt. It happened in last 15 years. With a 25 million population, Australia has now the highest per capita solar, which is 1,200 watt. Germany had 600-700, but we exceeded them. And it keeps going on up and up. That can happen with hydroponics if you want to make a bottom-up action. And I want to look at this, and these are broad, rough numbers. They look to me very similar. A plant capacity of an hydroponics, and we are working with one large hotel chain, about I think 30,000 plant capacity, 15 to 30,000. It's about $1, 50 cents to $1 per plant capacity. So this one, say 8, it will cost you about an $8. So that's the sort of rough estimate, which is very similar to solar, right? Now you can get almost 29 cents solar panel, where is Victoria, right? But install capacity, 50 cents to $1 per watt. So what I want to leave you with, please take this technology seriously. This is not just some retirees having fun. This can make a dent. COVID already did, showed us. I relied on this. I live in a 30th floor apartment. I eat on this. So I would suggest, as a call for action, please go and, if you're a policymaker, look at what policies needs to do. How can we engage communities in a big way? And women, I have a helper who is now can teach. She was shy to come. She could talk if it was a workshop, because that empowerment is what we are trying to do. We want, with the technology, doesn't matter whose product it gets, to be able to grow, because climate change is here and we have to do something. Sorry, I just wanted to say that to connect the dot. And thank you for listening. Now, if we'll take some questions, yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for, again, another very interesting session. I had introduced myself earlier on, but I think I must add another qualification, is that I am part of a household whose 60% at least of the food is grown in our garden. Now, because there is an auditor here, I have to qualify that I am only the consumer. Gender parity must be said, that everything has been done by my husband. But it's 60% and is doing everything that you just said. So I just want to add that qualification, indirect qualification. With this said, and appreciate very much the work in all the presentation, I had two comments. The first comment and question is for the last presenter, in the sense that you had a matrix of result, but I was waiting for one other parameter, which was food security, the trade-off between having exportable crop, but less food security, qualified by the fact that if you cannot grow rice, the alternative scenario is not more food security either. That's a question on you. On the, I was fascinated by the exposition from the Madame Regulator. I love the quote because I fully agree as an economist that has fallen into energy for the reason that you mentioned, is a factor of production ultimately. But my question is the following, and my comment associated with it. First, my question is, although I'm not very familiar with the energy matrix in the Philippines, I was a little bit surprised by the absence of one source of electricity that you have, which is geothermal. Geothermal, I'm not familiar with your capacity of hydro, but geothermal definitely is one area that is part of the renewable stock of electricity. So I would be interested in knowing that. The second thing, I fully agree. I have part of my work is on mini grids, and because of the geography, the capacity of developing local economy based on mini grid is becoming more and more important because of the capacity of doing stable generation, either with solar, with hydro, but also with other sources, once you put the battery in. So you have that. And last but not least, going back full circle to both generation and uses, we have a program in SMAP, where I come from, of the direct uses of geothermal. We have colleagues that come from Iceland, and part of what they do is a little bit equivalent with your work with hydroponics, but using distributed uses of geothermal. In that island, I mean, they grow tomatoes and they grow a lot of vegetables, the same principle that you have discussed with hydroponic, with direct uses of geothermal, also direct uses for heating. So these are just some comments because you are in a very interesting moment at the level of regulation and policies. So thank you very much.
Question?
No, my question first on this side was to understand what is the impact on the food security, and on the regulatory side, I wanted to understand better the geothermal part, and also the suggestions of going deeper in the mini grid approach, which also is decentralized electricity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Mona Lisa, you want to take that or answer
Maybe
first?
just, first of all, I want to thank you for raising that important question. We should remember in the lower Mekong region, currently the fruit cultivation is just around 366,000 hectares, while rice is still being cultivated in almost 4.2 million hectares. So the scale is totally different. And actually Vietnam, you know, I mean, in terms of rice exports, etc., they are not short of, in terms of rice self-sufficiency. They are the world's biggest exporter currently. So, but the point is that their affordability and the quality, safety, if you look at the food security, all the four angles, productivity, quality, safety, affordability. So with dragon fruit farmers, actually, because of this so much high income, they are able to afford in all the levels. I mean, they can afford better quality, nutritious vegetables, nutritious fruits, and a part of rice also. And so the thing is, we are looking at how the food security in the villages that have transformed, or they have moved from rice farming to dragon fruit farming, and how they are looking at all these four parameters. So There is no concern. It's not that whole Vietnam is going to convert into dragon fruit cultivation, but it is only in those areas where the salinity has become so serious. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for raising that question on geothermal, because I think for the Philippines, one very interesting story is the story of our geothermal journey. We were leaders in the geothermal space for a long time. We were second only to the US in terms of geothermal production. And if you recall one slide that I showed earlier, I talked about the irony that when when the RE law was passed, the years subsequent to the passing of the RE law, we saw a decline instead of an increase in renewable energy utilization. Part of that story is that, of course, we were not able to go into the details, but one of the crucial elements there was that there was no, because of the law that deregulated the power industry, and then the renewable energy law, which did not provide for geothermal to be part of the feed-in tariff program, that really showed the decline in renewable energy utilization in the Philippines. The first decline can be traced to the fact that all geothermal, power generation projects are now private sector driven. All the geothermal capacity prior to 2001 were all public sector investment. It's the government that was investing in geothermal production. That stopped in 2001 when the law deregulating the industry was passed. And because I don't know if nobody was just keeping track of it, and then we found ourselves 20 years down the road realizing we have just increased our geothermal capacity by 50 megawatts. Yes, yes. When prior to that, we were already at close to 2,000, I think, megawatts of geothermal. So that's really a tragedy, I think, for me, because geothermal is one of course, we know that geothermal can work as a base load. And what we need is baseload capacity to support the growth of RE. And now we're forced to, or we're part of the conversation is really what will happen or what will support this growth in RE if we retire the coal plants and our fossil fuel plants. And now we're exploring LNG. But what about geothermal? We need a policy. When I was still at the NREB, heading our National Renewable Energy Board, we proposed a policy to the Department of Energy of putting up maybe, we laid down several options, including what Indonesia had adopted, which is a program to support the capacity investment needed for geothermal exploration. That's one. There are several others that we can explore. I think we identified 3 in that policy recommendation. And we're still, I think DOE now is listening to and exploring various ways of pursuing geothermal energy. In fact, now we're talking about the green energy auction for those 5 technologies, but there will be a separate auction for geothermal, just as there will be a separate auction for offshore wind. So that's now being explored, because we know that I think we've ignored the development of geothermal for too long, and now we're realizing that this. I hope it's not too late, but we really need to work on this. And this is where I think, since we're in the ADB, this is where the bank can help. I think because sorry, giving it back to you. Because there is a lot of I think creative financing that needs to be done to support the geothermal, the regrowth, or the arising from the phoenix, rising as a phoenix of
Yeah,
this
it's a very
industry.
risky investment. It needs lovely.
Yes, the risk is front-ended. That's the
Yes.
problem with geothermal. It was possible before when government could afford that risk. But it was when EPIRA was passed and it was all made private sector driven. Private sector will go to where there is least risk possible.
Yep.
So I think that's part of the story that hasn't really been explored more extensively in the Philippines. But thank you again for that question.
Yeah. Is there any other questions? Not geothermal. let's not get into digress because it's geothermal is a big discussion. Yes, thank you.
Hello again. My name is Alimjan. I'm from Kazakhstan, as I said before. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting, very informative, especially the diagram with the dragon fruits when you have revised all the schemes, you know, like how it interacts with everything. It was very interesting. But my question is about is for the ladies who are growing the crops on the balconies. I have a friend who is using in Kazakhstan. Back in Kazakhstan, I have a friend who is using the another technology, which is aeroponics. I mean, it's like the next step from the hydroponics. I think everyone knows about this technology. So haven't you considered using aeroponics on your your plants? That's my only question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yes, you're right. Aeroponics is the next step after hydroponics because it really requires much more technical skills and capital because it requires some pumps that are not traditional to hydroponics. And so these costs would have been a bigger barrier to entry to really create a bigger impact because what we would have wanted is to really bring out these systems as easy as we can. Because if we created much more barriers to entry, such as higher technology, then it would be harder for people to, like, such as the women in communities, it would be harder for them to take care of these systems. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them. But for our corporate clients and the larger scale projects that we have in mind, we are not limited to our, let's say, easier systems, but we do apply traditional hydroponic systems as well as aeroponic technologies.
If I may just add that one of our panel members actually asked me something about the rooftop system. She said, so what happened if there's a storm and heavy rain? What happened to the plant? Will they be drowned? So good questions. So the system that we design, Sohail design, is a hybrid hydroponic. So the excess water drains out. We will just add additional nutrient. So the plant actually loves it when it rains hard and it's not so hot anymore. And like Joy would check on it in the morning and then he would measure the whether it's need additional nutrient and then she would just add it. So like Jessica said, it's easy system that easier, low entry, and anybody who wants to have, they can do it. We can set it up easier and then you can have this 20% investment and 80% return, as Sohail always say. So that's what we are aiming for now. But we can always customize for the higher technology, aeroponic, or whatever that the client wants.
Thank you. Let's take maybe one more question. We are running almost time. Any other? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Terry Cho from the urban sectors of ADB SDCC. I have two questions. First, for the chair women of the regulatory commissions. You have mentioned about the move away from the feed-in tariff to the option program in the Philippine context. I think that's I'm not trying to argue it. I'm not the energy guy, of course. But the RE, renewable energy, has its own features on it is maybe more bounded by the climate and the weather, for example, like the solar. So in the context of my own country, Taiwan, for example, so the government has to put this as some incentive to ask the industry to use more energy during the daytime because this is the most abundant source. So what's in the option system can be designed also to look at this aspect. And then the second question, I'm looking at the food security and then the hydroponic also. I think the experience I did before I joined the ADB in the World Bank and AIB is it is more easy for the bank to access as a bundle. So whether the small plot farmers using the hydroponic or the LED system you mentioned can be collaborate under the farmer organizations, then it will be easier to accessible to the International Development Bank financing. This kind of the aspect can be considered in the context of the ADB and how we can help. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll address the first question. So while the policy direction is to no longer pursue the feed-in tariff program and just pursue the auction program, you will see that at least in the Philippine version of the auction, it is some sort of iteration of the feed-in tariff program. There is a guaranteed price also. There's an auction there. It's a 20-year, it's a long-term contract also. It's system-wide. So the offtake is taken on by the system. There is an administrator of the fund that's also the administrator of the feed-in tariff fund. So the payment is also administration of the payment system is also streamlined in that sense. So I think that's why the interest of investors on the green energy auction program has really been sustained, because it's something similar, it's something familiar to them, especially those that are already in the feed-in tariff space. I think the benefit of pursuing the green energy auction program rather than the FIT is that our Philippine Renewable Energy Act limits the feed-in tariff program to just emerging technologies like solar, run-of-river hydro, which is not really emerging, but it's listed there, wind and biomass, which again is no longer, if you think about it, no longer emerging technology. So it's very limiting. But if you pursue the auction program, those limitations that are prescribed in the law will no longer be there. And that's why the DOE can now explore, as I mentioned earlier, an auction for geothermal, because geothermal was disqualified in the feed-in tariff program, precisely because in the Philippines, geothermal is no longer an emerging technology. Large impoundment hydro is another type of technology that wasn't considered already for the FIT, because it's no longer emerging technology in the Philippines. So, but in the auction, it's possible to have an auction for these types of projects.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one question for you, but we can discuss, because in Australia, my former employer now started a feed-in tariff for batteries. So feed-in tariff has a time of use feed-in tariff. So rather than giving me back during daytime, you give me back evening time, I'll give you 5 cents extra. That gives you motivation to, but that's a long discussion. But answering to your question, we sorted out the technology side of it. We sorted out making it simple so that anybody can grow. Especially, as Lauren said, we try to keep it the Pareto principle, but 80% of hydroponics benefit can we get with 20% effort. The locally produced system, because like this system maybe cost us $10 to make. If you go through Singapore airport, I have a photo, this sells exactly $200 Singaporean. So we want to bring the technology leapfrogging to my helpers family, thousands of people that Ruth is working with, and change their lives. That's the motto. So I'll more than happy to come and talk to you if you can guide us. And with that, I know there are a lot of questions. You have a question on geothermal, but our commissioner will be there. So share with me for a big hands with my fellow presenters. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. And don't forget to get the card from Kina if you want the presentation. Thank you.